to approve those minutes?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to approve those minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Those minutes are approved. There are no correspondence for tonight's meeting, so the next item are continuances. The first item that is likely to be continued is item 4A. And I understand that there is a potential issue, so I'd like to ask Peter to address that, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and this applies, I think, to two other applications that were on the agenda for this evening. As I understand it, this is an application for 4-lot subdivision, but there are also requests for waivers from certain provisions of the subdivision rules and regulations, and by definition, that converts what would otherwise be a minor subdivision into the major subdivision category. And if you take a look at our regulations, all major subdivisions in this area need to be submitted as a conservation development. The applicant has the option of also filing a conventional plan and trying to convince the board that you should be allowed to proceed with the conventional plan rather than a conservation development. And I don't know what happened procedurally here, but we understand that this and these two other applications, only the conventional plan was filed. So in order to make sure that we're following the regulations and giving the board the opportunity, if it's going to allow the conservation development, to make the proper findings that they prefer that plan versus the conventional plan or vice versa, we need to continue these so the applicants can submit the conservation plan and then proceed before the board.
And the three that are affected are which ones, Peter?
It's the application by Ellery Yahia, that is item 4A. Item 4F, the application by Eric and Melissa Curtin. And item 4G, the application of Juan Campos.
And I believe Mr. D'Addario, I think, represents the Curtins and may want to be heard on that issue.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman.
Please identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Richard D'Addario. I have a law office at 1 Courthouse Square in Newport. I'm here representing the developer of the 4-lot subdivision. It's under the name 288 Vaucluse LLC. My client is Eric Curtin. He's here. I know this is unfortunate that this is brought up today, and I understand that I've discussed with Mr. Regan the requirement that because it's a major subdivision, we're going to have to present some kind of a conservation plan to the board. I mean, in this case, the 4-lot subdivision here in lot sizes well exceed what the minimum is that was required. So there's a lot of open space already in this plan, and chances are the planning board, we hope, will adopt and approve the conventional plan. We had preliminary approval some time ago. But if it's necessary to submit it, we will. It's difficult for my client because he has a contract to sell one of the lots. This is not a profit-making venture for him. He's trying to retain one lot for himself and his family. And so, you know, the economics of it are a little bit difficult. So the earlier you can hear this matter for us, the better it would be. And I would also ask if there are any concerns that are out there now that we might be able to address between now and the next meeting on this conventional plan. Perhaps they could be relayed to us through the planner. If any of the board members have any, I don't know what there might be out there. And there's been no opposition to the plan. It appears to be in good order. There are a couple of, things that we're waiting for in terms of septic system design approvals and DEM approval, wetland approval. But other than that, I would ask, if the board is going to be considering any kind of special meetings or anything to move these forward, because this is unfortunate this wasn't brought to our attention earlier. We could have, of course, filed the conservation plan at an earlier date had we known that it was required for this And I know this issue was just raised recently, so.
I was somewhat alerted to this question, this issue, and I would like to propose to the board that we move our next meeting to February 5th. We can move it up 1 week.
Okay.
Is that, let me check with the board members to see if that's okay with them. Okay with you, Joe? BJ? You're checking? John?
I think I'm good.
Art?
So I'm good. I have a question though.
All right, hold on a sec.
Can I also interject as well, just as a notice to the applicants, if that board meeting is moved to February 5th, in order for us to do the proper notification to abutters and re-advertisement in the paper, we would need those conservation subdivision plans submitted 1 week from today.
I can't speak to whether the engineer can get that done. We'll certainly discuss that. I don't. She said she could. Oh, she can, okay. Good. Oh, there you are, okay. So yes, that sounds good. We'll try to meet that deadline, and
It's
and I
okay.
thank the board for moving the meeting up. I know you're all volunteers, and it's not easy sometimes, but.
Yeah, but I understand it's okay with everyone, so may I have a motion to move our next meeting from the 12th to the 5th?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to move our next regular meeting from February 12th to February 5th. Any discussion?
I do have a question with
Okay.
this particular application.
Sure.
So Peter, you did a good job of explaining that this is a change to what we, in the past, right? There's no requirement. There is now a requirement to
Well,
submit.
I don't know what the practice has been in the past, but the regulations, the new regulations which you recently adopted require both a conventional and a conservation plan.
Okay.
The regulations that were in effect when these applications were filed required submission of a conservation plan if it was a major subdivision.
I see. Okay.
With the option to also provide a conventional plan. And I think the confusion here was because the number of lots was less than the lots that kicked it into the major category, that it was the waivers that kicked these from minor to
Understood.
major, so.
So I understand that's a bit further question. The other two applications that this is affected by is A and G, 4A, A, and
Correct.
G. So we did hear testimony already on A and F. Did we not hear testimony on G? We did not. Well, we already heard testimony. Just want to be clear on that, and that's a fair amount of testimony. So now we're going to probably be subject to additional, will they have to come back and redo all this testimony, or?
That'll be up to the applicants, that there are certain, if you decide to allow a conventional plan versus a conservation plan, there are certain findings in the regulations that you have to make, and so you need to be satisfied that you've got the ability to do that based on the evidence that's presented.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just to clarify one thing, we were here September 11th, and we obtained master plan approval
Master
at
plan.
that
You
time.
said
So
preliminary,
I
that's fine.
assume that, yeah, I was wrong on that, but the master plan was approved. So I assume that if the board decides that the conventional plan is acceptable and the conservation plan is not something that we would go forward with, that we would not have to come back and start it all over again and have the master plan developed. I
That's
would think
correct.
that stands on its own at this point. Am I
That's
correct?
Is
Yes.
that true?
I would be,
mean,
yes, I would be comfortable with that, assuming
Okay.
that the board
If he's
makes
comfortable,
that
we're
decision.
comfortable.
All right, then we'll see you February 5. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well,
Ladies.
I've got a question.
Yeah?
Since we're going to consider both these plans, I would assume they would be in our packets for consideration prior to a meeting. Is it the plan for somebody in the planning department to suggest an opinion before we meet on the viability of either one?
So that's one of the reasons why I'm saying that the conservation plan would have to be submitted 1 week from today. So that allows us to both give it to you in your packet, but also re-notify abutters and put an ad in the paper, because it would be an amendment to their current application, submitting an additional plan. So you would get it like your normal packets for the next February meeting.
And also the Conservation Subdivision plan, now we have measured that in a different way as when it would be viable and not viable also, correct? In the number of lots? Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion to move the next meeting from the 12th to the 5th.
So
Any further
Could you
discussion?
clarify what, Eric Curtin, the applicant, could you clarify what you mean by the conservation changes?
Well, the number of lots now that can be defined in a conservation subdivision have been,
The amount of land.
It was, yeah, there was a change, so new applications that are filed now, there's a 3-acre threshold, where if they're more than 3 acres, whether they're minor or major, have to submit both conservation and conventional.
Okay.
yeah, so if you had a 2-lot subdivision, you're okay.
Very well.
All set? Okay, with no further discussion on this motion to move the meeting,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, sorry, just one
Yes.
clarification on, if the filing, and I'm sorry, J. Russell Jackson, representing the applicant Juan Campos, this is your item 4G. Can we all agree that the requirement for TRC is waived as far as the filing of these new conservation subdivision applications?
Why-
So in
why
other
would
words,
that
for
be
instance,
waived? Why would that be waived if we
well,
have to?
for instance, my client has already gone through the TRC process. Conservation subdivision was discussed informally. They've already drafted a plan, but an actual application was never submitted, and they moved forward with the conventional subdivision application. So I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to be heard next month, and then we don't get sidetracked into a multi-month TRC process on a conservation subdivision plan, which I think both my client and the town agree is probably less attractive than the, or suitable for the area than the standard conventional plan.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chair. So we've had a motion, a second, discussion, and now we're talking about the meeting. The motion was for the meeting. Now we've got 3 applicants
Okay.
up here, so we're.
So
we need to
what
do
you
this.
might want to do is deal with either table the motion or deal with the date of the next meeting, and then we can address this question.
Well, we need the date of the next meeting for continuing the applications.
Yes. With regard, if I might comment on the question, it would seem to me that it would be premature to send anything back to TRC until the board has determined which plan it prefers. And so it would make sense for the board to take a look at both plans, make that determination, and if it's determined that it prefers the plan that has not gone to TRC, then to send it to TRC at that point in time, rather than,
I mean, we don't know what we're dealing with
Again,
here.
point of order.
Yeah.
We're on 4A. The motion is to continue the meeting to.
Well, we didn't bring
Okay, so
4A
it's-
formally,
All right, so it's.
but
it's
we
just
do have a
something-
motion to change the date of the meeting. Let us deal with that and we'll come back.
Why don't we withdraw that, let the applicant come up one at a time, and we'll deal with it then. And if we move the meeting on the 5th for the first one, then the
Yeah,
ones that fall in.
let's
after.
move the date because we need that for continuing. We need to know
Fine.
what date we're continuing.
That's fine.
So we have a motion to move the date from the 12th to the 5th. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The next meeting will be, the next regular meeting of the planning board will be February 5th.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, any further discussion on any of these projects that are affected?
Now, and just as a comment, I'm satisfied with Mr. Regan's proposal that we're back here on the 5th, and if the board is inclined to have my client at least further investigate the conservation subdivision and send us back to TRC at that point, that's certainly acceptable. I was just worried about getting sidetracked with TRC prior to coming back here on the 5th. That's all. Thank you.
And just for the record, I would like
Identify
to
yourself,
identify myself, David Martland. I'm here representing the Aquidneck Island Land Trust, which is an abutter to the Campos subdivision. We've got no problem with the meeting on the 5th, and I'm satisfied with leaving the question open as to whether or not this matter should go back to
Okay.
TRC.
Okay,
So
thank
I-
you.
I've got
Mark?
another question just to confuse everybody. The sequencing of the TRC. Now, it would seem to me to be prudent for the TRC to be looking at a conservation plan and a regular plan, rather than come to the planning board where we make a decision, and that has to go back to the TRC.
but under the regulations, and I understand that in the future, they'll be looking at both. In this particular instance, it's already been in the TRC, and under the regulations, it's the planning board that has the discretion to choose one plan over the other, or to allow a conventional plan in lieu of the conservation plan. So under this particular circumstance, I don't think it's prudent to go back to TRC until the board has
This-
at
this
least
is because
made that decision if it feels it has enough information to do so.
But in the future,
In the future, yeah, they submit both in the future.
Correct.
For whatever reason they got missed, it is what it is, and
Yeah.
we're trying to correct it. and-
Okay, so let's move to continuances. The first item to be continued is item 4A, public informational meeting. Application of Ellery Yahia for master plan approval of a 4-lot subdivision, including a proposed new road and request for waivers from certain provisions of Article 5 and Article 6 of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land. The property is located at the intersection of Peckham Avenue and Vaucluse Avenue and is identified as 206 Peckham Avenue, Tax Assessors Plat 128, Lot 31. May I have a motion to continue this item to February 5th?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to continue this item. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. This item is continued. The next item is item 4B, public hearing, application of Jack Gullison for development plan review, including requests for waivers from certain design standards of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, Section 521, for construction of a new commercial building to include an 18-room hotel with a restaurant and associated site work located on property identified as 59 Aquidneck Avenue, Assessors Plat 115 SE Lot 169. May I have a motion to continue this item to the February 5th meeting?
motion to continue.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion?
Is there a reason why? Yeah. I mean, there is.
They requested it.
They were, that I didn't know.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Lynch on behalf of the applicant. There is a reason. We have scaled down the project and redesigned the parking lot. That we are required to go back to DOT for an amended PAP permit. I know Ms. Small has submitted that application, so we're just waiting to get that final approval from the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The application is continued. The next item is item 4F, public hearing, application of Eric and Melissa Curtin for preliminary plan approval of a 4-lot subdivision, including proposed new roads. The applicant is requesting that the board authorize the administrative officer to review and approve the final plan once submitted. The property fronts on Vaucluse Avenue and Summerfield Lane and is located approximately 1,000 feet south of the intersection of Vaucluse Avenue and Peckham Avenue. Assessors Plat 129, Lot 210. May I have a motion to continue this item
So moved.
to the February 5th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue this item to the February 5th meeting. Any discussion?
I have some discussion. Just in the, why we're being asked to have the planner authorize the final plan, the planning board.
Yeah, I.
Why don't we
question
save
as
that for
well.
when we're dealing with it? All we're doing now is just continuing it. But, I mean, it's a good question. I had the same question,
Yeah, we
but
all think the same.
let's wait till we're dealing with it. Any further discussion? All those in favor of continuing this item, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued. The next item is item 4G, public informational meeting. Application of Juan Campos for master plan approval of a 5-lot subdivision, including extension of an existing town road and request for waivers from certain provisions of Article 5 and Article 6 of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land. The property is located at the end of Serenity Drive, with frontage also on Maidford River Road, and is identified as Tax Assessors Plat 120, lots 68A and 68B. May I have a motion to continue this item to the February 5th meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Motion is made and seconded to continue this item. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. This item is continued to the February 5th meeting. The next item to be continued is item 5A. A public hearing, request of James Paradise, owner of property at 170 Aquidneck Avenue, Plat 115 SE, lots 145, 146, 147, for a waiver of development plan review pursuant to Section 908 of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land. May I have a motion to continue this item to the February 5th meeting?
Motion made?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in...
Again, a reason why it might be continued, is there a reason why we're continuing?
We received a request from the attorney.
From the applicant?
Yeah.
No reason given?
I believe it had to do with the length of the agenda tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. This item is continued to the February 5th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there may be one other matter that's going to be continued.
That's right, I didn't know if you had gotten through your continuances or not, but item 4D, if we could continue that to the regular meeting. I spoke with Mr. Martland earlier today. He indicated he has just got involved representing an objector, and we've agreed to continue that to February 5.
So the applicant is requesting that that item be continued also?
Yes.
Okay, that was new to me, but... May
Motion to
I-
continue?
May I have a motion to continue item 4D to the February
Fifth.
5th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to continue this item to the February 5th meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is continued. Okay, now we can get down to business. Next item on the agenda is item 4C. Request of the Zoning Board of Review for a recommendation on an application of Acacia Newport LLC for a special use permit to allow construction of a single-family dwelling in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District, property located at 32 Acacia Drive South, Assessors Plat 109 NE Lot 178.
Mr.
Lynch.
Chairman, just for the record, I'm going to butter to that project, so Ms. Desotella is going to be advising the board on this matter.
Thank you. Mr. Lynch.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jay Lynch from the law firm of Moore, Vergadamo, and Lynch, representing the owner and the applicant. What is before you this evening is a request for an advisory opinion,
Yeah.
it's a request for an advisory opinion to the Zoning Board of Review for development in the Zone 1 Watershed Protection District. We recently had a site visit for the property. This property is located off of Acacia Drive South. It is currently an existing two-family dwelling on the site that is served by an existing septic system. The property is just to the west of the reservoir. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing structure rebuild a one-family dwelling on the site. In addition to the renovations to the structure, the applicant is going to remove the existing septic that services the building and install sewer, public tie into sewer, public water, and public sewer.
Clarification, they will remove it because the last time, when we were on the site visit, they were either going to remove it or leave it in place, bury it in place?
Well, it's going to be discontinued, it's going to be buried in place, but it is going to be serviced, but it's not going to be used anymore. We're going to have public sewer on the site. I think the process is to fill the septic and leave it in place. I do have Lynn Small here, and I'll have Lynn address some of the criteria for the advisory opinion to the board. As you recall, property slopes from west to east, dramatically downhill, and it drains into the Zone 1 area. The proposed structure is going to be located, half of it's going to be in the Zone 1 area, and half of the structure is outside of the structure, the Zone 1 area. We do have some drainage features that are located in the Zone 1 area. I realize that the regulations desire that any runoff be located outside of the Zone 1 area. However, due to the grade of the property, I think I'm almost qualified to say it's impossible to get water to go uphill. So I'll have Ms. Small explain the problems with complying with that part of the ordinance. I don't have any other general comments. I don't know if you have any questions to me. I can bring up Ms. Small, and she can address the technical aspects of the design of the project.
Comments from the board? Mike?
Yes.
There's no increase in impervious surface with the new design?
I will have Ms. Small, she's better qualified to address that question than I am.
Okay.
So is Lynn coming up? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll have a question for her. No, actually, no, it's not necessarily her question. Jay, the new structure is going to be single family, and it's going on pretty much on the same footprint?
It's almost on the exact same footprint. We meet all of the setbacks for zoning. We meet lot coverage. There is going to be, it's a one family, but it's going to have an in-law apartment in the site.
So I understand we don't have any purview on that, but the plans are small, my eyes are failing me at my young age. The setback on it's a side yard setback. Is it 20 on the side and you're showing 19? And again, I know that's not our purview, but I just question why the plan shows 19 and it's 20.
It should be 20, because I know that the design does comply
It looks like there's a
with the
bump out
setbacks.
there. Is that
It looks like,
window projection, 12-foot projection over setback?
well, the plan that I'm looking at looks like it does meet the front yard setback, and it also complies with the, oh, I see that, in the back corner.
Yes, yeah. Again, not a big deal for me, but you mentioned, I wanted to know, I guess my point is that it's on the same footprint.
Well, it is being moved, the existing footprint does encroach on the front yard setback.
Oh, okay.
And I believe it encroaches more on the rear yard setback. We're going to be moving that to make it more compliant.
And the only other comment, relative to that, is because it's on the footprint, if you look at that plan a little closely, and again, my eyes are deceiving me, it shows 19, but then there's a hatched area that looks like that's also within the setback. I don't know if that's an overhang or it's an overhang. I'm fine then, that's good.
Okay.
That's all I was.
Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, 55 John Cock Road, Middletown. We did the site plans that are before you tonight. The project includes the proposal to demo the existing building and rebuild a single-family home. We do have a small increase in impervious area. This was something that I had offered to get to you before this meeting tonight. for the addition of the garage that we have added to this project now. So there's approximately 400 to 500 square feet of additional impervious area associated with that increase in footprint to the structure. We did bring, from a zoning perspective, I know that's not really your area, but we did bring the building, which under existing conditions does not comply with the setback requirements, to comply with the setback requirements. That 19 that you're seeing there is from the overhang. According to the zoning ordinance, you're allowed to have your overhangs up to 12 inches within the side, front, or your setback. That's allowed without a variance.
Not gonna be, there's no footprint, it's just an overhang.
Just footprint, just an overhang. Yes, you're right, overhang, no footprint. From an environmental perspective, we will be providing an improvement, in my opinion. We'll be changing a septic system that's outdated without any pretreatment to a connection to the municipal sewer system. This will require that the owner create a new pump station and then put the force main down Acacia, drive south all the way up to Bliss. I believe it's Bliss, where we'll tie into the municipal system. Under the current regulations with the town, when you do this, you're required to repave half the roadway. If you're familiar with this roadway, that's probably pretty much all of the roadway. So there'll be that benefit that the town gets as a result of this project, beyond the environmental benefit of not having a septic system within 200 feet of the coast. Additionally, this site under existing conditions has no provisions for water quality treatment or stormwater. This proposal includes pretreatment, a rain garden, which will improve groundwater recharge and provide water quality treatment for the impervious surfaces that we're proposing for the project. So we do also have to go to CRMC after we get the zoning approval, hopeful zoning approval for this project. So we'll have their added review to this project, which they focus mostly on the coastline and the protecting nature of that. Otherwise, we have municipal water and electricity for the site, which we'll continue to have. The rest of the site will remain undisturbed.
One quick question, is it feasible for the
Move to the
drainage
mic.
put it-
Okay, move to the mic.
Is it feasible for your drainage to put that rain garden anywhere outside of the Zone 1 district?
With the way we have this property laid out, the separation requirements from the property line, and we're abandoning the existing septic system in place, we wouldn't be able to meet any of those separation requirements. The overflow from that drainage system would also go directly towards other features on the site, which would not work out so well. I mean, we have a pool and there's landscaped areas which you wouldn't necessarily want to discharge a drainage system towards. So the location that we have, we could pull it inland a little bit from where we have it shown, but putting it on the other side of the house, completely outside the 200-foot offset from the water's edge, is not really a practicable solution. I don't believe we'd be able to fit the whole thing there, and then it would create issues with separating everything. So the location we have is the best, but what we can offer to the board is that we pull it in closer to the home. That'll maximize the separation.
Should that be added as a condition? Anything else?
I don't have anything else unless you have any questions.
Questions?
No.
Mike?
I see it as an overall improvement because you're getting rid of the septic system. You're getting town water, right? You're getting the water from the town, right? And you're basically almost on the same footprint as the existing.
I agree.
Yeah, so, yes.
Thank you.
PJ?
Yes, I think you have many plus features on this property, and it's a lovely, beautiful piece of property, and I think that you've done a wonderful job putting it together, and I'm very much impressed with it.
Thank you.
Art? Yeah.
I'm fine.
You fine? Comments on this side? John, you fine? I'm fine with this also. May I have a motion for a favorable recommendation to the zoning board?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded.
There are 3 recommended conditions of approval on your page on the back side right now. The first recommended condition of approval regards directing the stormwater runoff outside of the watershed protection district. The applicant has just indicated that to the degree feasible, that is not possible. If you agree with that and no longer want this as a condition, I would recommend striking that and potentially, as you indicated, adding a new condition in its place regarding moving of the rain garden closer to the house. And then the additional 2 conditions regarding chemical usage and pervious pavement infiltration.
So my understanding is the first condition is no longer required, but we will add a condition to move the rain garden closer to the house. Do we want to specify a certain distance or just leave it open? How close can you move it to the house?
I know that we can't go any closer than 10 feet by code. I don't know if there's any specific issues why we couldn't go as close as 10 feet.
It looks, according to the drawing, it looks like you have about 20 feet before you hit the
slope.
slope,
So I know
so-
we can at least bring it to where we're
How about
doing
15
that
feet?
change grade.
15 feet, okay?
I'm sorry.
15 feet?
That should be fine.
Let's put that in the condition. 15 feet closer to the house.
Thank you.
So may I have a,
I got one question. We consistently put condition 3 in all these applications relative to Water Protection District 1. There's absolutely no way to inspect or enforce it. Why do we bother to put it in?
Well,
you got to put it in so that...
I think you gotta put it in case, I mean, it's tough to police. I can't say it's not enforceable, but it's difficult to enforce, difficult to police, but a necessary requirement nevertheless.
If a problem arises, you want to make sure it's there rather than not there.
Yeah.
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 So may I have a motion to, for a favorable recommendation of this item, subject to the conditions 2 and 3 on the planning document, plus the additional condition to move the rain garden 15 feet closer to the house?
I'll make that motion that as Paul stated, and that the request does meet the standards as indicated on the same memo.
I'll second that motion.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item is item 4E, application of Brennan Realty LLC, Bernadette Realty LLC, and Mark Byrne Realty LLC for final plan approval for an 11-lot major subdivision of property fronting on Mitchell's Lane. The property is identified as 430 Mitchell's Lane, Assessors Plat 124, lots 13, 14, 14A, 15, and is located approximately 1,300 feet to the north of the intersection of Mitchell's Lane and Fayal Lane. Mr. Silva.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Robert M. Silva, attorney for the applicant in this matter, Mark Brennan and his family corporations. We just completed the final, or the most recent, I should say, TRC review Monday morning, and it appeared that everything was in good order, and what was being suggested was of no difficulty for Mr. Brennan to accomplish. I have with me tonight Chris Duhamel, our engineer throughout this program and this project, and he's been in communication with Mr. Wolanski and his staff, also Steve Cabral from the town's consulting engineer and engineering company on the revisions and remediation of the plan. We also obtained an answer to the question would Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management require us to restart the process for the DEM approval in light of the fact that there were some revisions to the leaching field and subdrains and things of that nature. We finally got an answer from Mohammed, who's responsible for this project at DEM, and he sent an email in indicating that the design that was revised and sent to him for his review, it's acceptable to DEM. And we passed that information on to Mr. Wolanski, who in turn passed it on to Mr. Cabral from Crossman Engineering, and Mr. Cabral was at the TRC meeting on Monday morning. So the matter of this subdivision it's a conservation subdivision. We didn't have any problems with the technical reading of the regulations. It was, in fact, approved quite some time ago on a preliminary basis with certain conditions. We then went on to the TRC process, and some of those conditions were tweaked and some revisions made. So we're before you tonight with the revised plans, which have been reviewed and accepted to the TRC's approval, and I believe there's a recommendation in writing to the board from TRC that they voted to recommend approval, subject to the conditions that are referenced in this matter. I have, as I say, Mr. Duhamel here to answer any questions.
Point of order question. Peter? Are we, I guess, are we approving, are we looking to approve the final plan, or is it not approved based on them? So paragraph, the reason I'm referring to is 1, 2, 3, paragraph number 4. I understand how the process works, but I guess my question is are we voting on an approval of the final plan tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's fine. Based on, as the memo says, 2 conditions. I understand the technical stuff that was done. At least 2 conditions that Ron's pointed out here, or you have, Rita. So I'll ask, those 2 conditions have been addressed, or at least those 2 conditions, and frankly, my only other concern on this is the statement on the next paragraph that the plans have been updated since preliminary plan review satisfy, quote, many of the conditions. I'm assuming they've complied with all of the conditions of the preliminary plan.
Some of the conditions will carry over onto
Right.
your final plan approval, so not everything
So we're
was
not
addressed.
missing anything on the plans, because there's a lot of conditions and a lot of carryover. I know you've been very thorough, and I appreciate it, and Ron had. I know it's been a tough follow, because a lot gets carried over. So we are voting on a final plan approval, and relative to the 2 conditions or a couple more that have already been addressed a little bit, but the TRC has done it as well. Okay, thank you.
I have one thing.
I got a question, too. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Art.
I didn't make a copy of the email I got on the TRC change, but I know that one insignificant that was put forth by the town engineer had to do with the new subdrain, and the new subdrain would be impacted and analyzed through the wet season. So I think that's, there was some big discussion about that at the TRC the other day. And I think that's what everybody agreed to when they voted on it, the TRC board.
Yes, we
Yes.
left it in.
Please
Chris Duhamel with
identify
Dupree.
yourself, please.
My name's Chris Duhamel, professional engineer and land surveyor with Dupree Engineering. We had left the TRC with the agreement that we would provide hydrogeologic flow calcs for the revised location of the subdrain, and that it would prove equal or greater in depth than what is currently existing on site. And we intend to work closely with DEM and the Crossman Engineering to provide those calculations.
Can you define the wet season? I mean, I've been in parts of the world where there's a wet season, but when does that start and end in Rhode Island?
January 1 to April 1st, and then monitoring has to occur over that time period.
After, okay. Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Mike?
Yes. In that light, so when will the new sub-drain be installed?
During construction of the community leach field, we'll construct that subdrain. We'll provide calculations again in conformance with what the TRC committee had asked for. We'll provide those to the DEM OWTS section, proving what we believe to be indisputable, that the subdrain will, being moved closer to the leach field will work more effectively in lowering the groundwater table. So we'll provide the calculations that back that up as well. During the construction of the leach field, we'll certify that it's built according to DEM standards and regulations, and that there's no deviation from that, and that'll be part of the conformance for the construction of the community leach fields.
I'm kind of concerned about the sequence of things, like the installation of the subdrain, the period of the wet season, the start of construction, shouldn't there be a particular sequence that we follow in doing those three things? I mean, it sounds like we might be overlapping one. We'd start the construction before before we might be getting the permitting. I'm wondering about things like that. It's not that clear when I look at some of the questions here.
The sequencing could be at the same period of time, or the subdrain could be built ahead of the community leach field, if that's a preference. The inspection of that would be the requirement of Deprete Engineering. We'll notify the town if they wish to come out, but it's really the DEM and the consultant engineer that review that and verify that. So that could be done ahead of the construction of the community leach field. The construction of the sewer force main, that has to be notified to the town DPW department. That's within the plans that it's to meet town specifications, and all inspections have to be made by the town. So that is part of the septic system, but that is also part of the town's requirement.
Does the town's consulting engineer, have anything to say about the way that process works?
He's here. Yeah. Mr. Cabral, could you come forward, please?
So we're changing the, we're going to...
I'm Steve Cabral with Crossman Engineering.
So we're going to redesign the subdrain, and then we're going to install it, and then we're going to go through a wet season to check its functionality, and then we're going to permit the design of the building of the septic system. Can you tell me how that process works?
Okay, but just to take a step back as to why I'm comfortable with the new underdrain installation, and the reason is, say the existing underdrain is 8 feet deep. The requirement is that the relocated underdrain be the same depth, say 8 feet deep. And that new underdrain is going to be closer to the leach field at the same depth. And the impact of an underdrain on the water table is such that there's a transitional slope of the groundwater from the bottom of the underdrain, which is 8 feet deep, back up to the original grade. So when the underdrain moves over, that transitional slope will essentially be the same. It's just that it's getting closer to the underdrain. Therefore, the actual benefit is that the groundwater table is expected to be actually a little bit lower with the new underdrain than with the existing underdrain. If the proposed underdrain was going to be higher, then there would be a major concern. But the applicant has agreed it would be at the same depth. So really, there should not be any concern about the operation of this underdrain. If anything, it'll be better because it's closer, plus the materials are going to be of a better quality. For example, I don't believe the existing stone surrounding the underdrain is wrapped in a filter fabric, but the new system will. When it comes to the process, it's my understanding that the TRC condition only required a mathematical proof that the new underdrain would work. I do not believe that the TRC voted to require that the performance be monitored throughout the wet season. So actually, the installation of the leach field and the underdrain could occur at any time, but DEM will not allow the septic systems to be operational until well after that underdrain is installed and accepted and operational. Now, what we would recommend is, the first thing, build the underdrain so that the area would be much drier and more workable. So personally, I would install the underdrain first, then the leach field. And one of the issues or characteristics of this leach field, which is a bottomless sand filter, is that there'll be a test well, a monitoring pipe, right in the middle of that bottomless sand filter. So at any time, anyone, the applicant or the town, could actually measure the depth to the water table to confirm how it's operating. You know, that could be done, you know, anytime.
We're confident that we'll not only follow the plans as they've been revised,
Okay.
but the pre-engineering will remain in communication with not only the Department of Environmental Management, but also Mr. Cabral office while this process is going on. There'll be communication forthcoming, because we don't want any problems going down the road, so to speak.
Yes, and one other thing I'll mention is there was a concern as to whether or not the installation of the new underdrain would negate the original septic system permit, and if there was a new process that the applicant would have to follow. And it's my understanding that DEM responded via an email to the applicant stating that there would be no new application process to go through. It's just that they wanted the applicant to certify that the underdrain would work properly. But DEM did not require wet season testing. Although, as it was mentioned during the TRC meeting, the town's engineer, you know, was very thorough, and he questioned whether or not that should be done. But in the end, after discussing, you know, the operation and the location of the new leach field, it was agreed that it could just be confirmed mathematically.
So did the TRC recommend monitoring that during the wet season?
No, condition number 11 of your January 6th memo, groundwater hydrology calculations must be submitted to DEM with a copy to the town and the town's consulting engineer. So they were satisfied with the calculations instead of actual monitoring.
And we're prepared to do that
Okay.
and accept that as a condition. Thank you, Mr. Cabral.
Any other discussion? BJ?
Yes, I'd like to just ensure that there is either an engineer or a supervisor on the project during the entire time, particularly when the construction of this septic system is
That's what the
done.
pre-engineering is hired to do.
Are you going to be there every day?
We're required to by DEM regulations.
Well, if you're there every day, I'm certain it will be a good job.
Well, thank you.
I got one other question.
It's in our interest as well.
Yes.
Mike?
We were submitted an operation and maintenance plan before the meeting. It's, and one last week. Is there a difference between the two? It looks like one has a rev number next to it and the other one doesn't. I don't know what the difference is.
Tom?
There are requirements to, from the TRC meeting to specify snow removal, responsibilities, and locations, and that was added to the,
The conditions.
prior to that, we had added requirements identified by Crossman Engineering as to what should be tested, what water quality tests should be tested and monitored over the period of the subdivision and reported to the town as one matter. And responsibilities of the homeowners association throughout the for street sweeping, the homeowners association is responsible. Snow removal, I just stated. Ownership of the stormwater system to be the homeowners association. There's several conditions that were discussed in part of this final approval that were incorporated within the O&M manual, and that could be further verified after this meeting. So
My recommendation would be, what the applicant delivered today was trying to satisfy the conditions of the TRC, but since it was delivered today, I'd recommend that you leave the conditions in place so that staff can verify. That just safeguards so we have a chance to make sure
that'd be
that
my question.
what was submitted can be reviewed properly.
True. Okay.
So
Bill?
just to be clear, like you said, conditions within the memo today and how they relate to being pulled into the final, we really, typically we have a final document in front of us and we can scratch a condition, add a condition. Is that going to be able to be done if you can take, like you said, verify those conditions on the plan and translate them into the final, I guess, approval and the document itself?
So what would happen is today, if you were to provide an approval subject to these conditions before recording, the plan would have to be updated and verified by staff based on the conditions that the planning board set forth. So that's why I'm recommending leaving those conditions in place,
Okay.
just so that it can be verified afterwards.
Any other
Okay.
comments or discussion? You have a motion for a final plan approval,
So I'll make the motion to,
subject to all the conditions.
correct, grant final plan approval to this project, subject to the memo dated January 6th, relative to the TRC, in addition to the memo dated December 17th, with the discussion we had relative to verifying conditions and the plans, and that this plan, this final plan, does meet all of the required findings as indicated in the memo 1 through 5, dated December 17th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded for final plan approval, subject to all of the cited conditions. Is there any further discussion?
I would be a lot more comfortable seeing all the conditions in front of us before we vote on something.
You have them in that pile of papers for the
Yeah, but
last
we got
2
some
years.
some stuff came in today, which I haven't had a chance to look at. So,
All it does is meet the condition which has not been accepted, but it's left to the planning office to verify. Quite frankly, under the law, we don't even have to be in front of the planning board for final approval. It's usually allowed for the planner to do that, but because this had a tortured history, and in the preliminary decision, there was additional language saying that these conditions should be approved by the planning board. We came back to the planning board. But I have every confidence that Mr. Wolanski and staff will make absolutely sure when they prepare the final decision that those conditions are in there, and they know exactly what went on in the several technical review hearings.
well,
All right.
if that's the fact, then maybe we don't need a planning board. We can just have the planner do everything.
You
I'm just
don't-
saying I'm personally not comfortable. It's not that I don't trust anybody, but I would like to see a complete list of every condition in front of me tonight.
You can be provided that when the planning office prepares the final decision.
Mr. Silva, hold on a second, please. My understanding is the condition, as is stated, requires staff to assure that the document changes are appropriate. So I don't know what more is needed.
Well, the general rule for information coming to the planning board is supposed to be in the planning office a week prior to, at least a week prior to the meeting. So whenever this missive arrived, when, today? I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, okay. What are you not comfortable with that you just received? It tells us that we can't put snow in a certain area, and we have to follow a regulation, which
Well,
we've done.
here's what I'm uncomfortable about. I haven't read the document. I got it when I got here at
I know.
5 to 6. That's all I'm saying.
Substantially the same document that's received. We had provided additional language as required by the TRC about snow removal, about requirements for the homeowners association. It's ministerial in nature, and it's something that easily can be handled by Rita or Ron. It's not.
Well,
We
the
didn't
fact
disagree.
is, the requirement is that material should come a week ahead. I know this project has been around for a long time, and these are administrative changes, and staff can handle it. But Mr. Weber does have a point. These should come in a week ahead of time so that we can take a look at them. I mean, that's well-known, well-established.
We had the TRC on Monday,
Yeah, I understand.
and these
I understand.
documents weren't required until Monday.
I understand, Mr. Silva.
Yeah,
The requirement is the planning board should get them a week ahead of time.
that's your own requirement, which can be waived.
Mr. Chair,
Well,
point-
I'm very willing to go forward with this evening because I'm satisfied that the staff will in fact assure
So
these
am I.
conditions will be met. I'm just stating what the requirement is that is well known, so. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 6-1.
Mr. Fenton, did you vote against it?
No.
You didn't? Who did?
I did.
Oh, Arthur. Could you put on the record your reason?
I already explained it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The next item is item 5B. Request of C Corp, care of David Lucia, for development plan review, including waivers from certain design standards of the Middletown rules and regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, Section 521, for proposed expansion of a commercial building and parking lot located at 85 Johnny Cake Hill Road, Assessors Plat 115, Lot 50. May I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is open.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Lynn Small from Northeast Engineers, 55 John Clock Road. I'm here representing the engineering and survey for the project. I have owner representation, Kevin Borges from Secor, who will be here to answer any questions and speak on behalf of the use of the building and the expansion of the footprint. We did have a TRC meeting on Monday, and we did make a couple changes, but they're only to remove waivers. So I do have a revised landscape plan that I could submit to you. Is that okay?
Rita,
Thank you, Lynn.
you have this already?
That's what's up on the screen, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks. I know, it's terrible. But it's a landscape plan, we know that.
I'll take a picture.
I can't read any of it. Thank you.
So you're going to have to describe what's on here. This
You don't
is-
like how small it is?
Well, it's a little difficult to,
I did send a PDF to Rita, so she has it for the screen.
you can describe.
There's not a lot of changes to it. I didn't realize we had a landscape waiver associated with our submission, so we only revised it to remove that waiver. So we added some trees and made sure they were 4-inch diameter caliper.
So
that's-
the waiver is going away?
The waiver is going away. So the project is one of the C-Core buildings out in the industrial park. This site is bounded by 3 lots: Johnny Cake Hill Lane, John Clock Road, and Hammerland Way. Right now, they have parking entrances off Johnny Cake Lane and John Clock Road, but overall, the project has less parking than they need, and actually less parking than they would be required by zoning. This petition in front of you tonight actually brings this project into compliance with the zoning requirements for parking. The entrance to the parking area will be off Hamlin Way in the back of it's It's kind of in the back of the building, is how it's orientated on site. They do have a small addition on the southern side of the property, which is basically the only portion of the building that doesn't front on a roadway. This is just a very small garage-type entranceway. It's, I forgot the dimensions, but I believe it's about 18 by 30 feet. It's very small. The parking lot proposes to add 28 parking spaces to the development. They may do it in a phased construction. So if you see those on the north side of the entrance driveway are dashed, if they needed to, for funding purposes, phase the construction, those on the north side would be done afterwards. However, all of the drainage system and entranceway and garage bay would all be installed under the first phase of the project. The site would drain towards John Cock Road. It's weird I keep saying that wrong because we're on that road. But we do have a sand filter system which will provide water quality, and then that goes into a detention system which will then discharge across the grass and then eventually down to the roadway. We have a reduction in our peak runoff as we're required. The project proposes more than 5,000 square feet of disturbance to the site, which is what kicks us into development plan review, which is why we're here at a public meeting. It is less than 1 acre, so we are subject to only town permit review and approvals. We did go to the TRC. I believe conditions of those approval include engineering review of the design plans. They did do a review of the landscape plan that you have, that I just distributed to you, which removes a couple of the waivers that we had. There's no new utilities proposed. We do have some lighting within the parking area. We submitted that illumination plan to you as part of your packet. And we ensured that there's no spillage off any of the lots, although it is an industrial park. We're surrounded by all industrial uses, so it's not a residential area. If I can go quickly through the waivers, just sorry about the messy of this. I don't have an attorney on staff, so I'm playing both. The first waiver we're asking for corresponds to the walkway and pedestrian access within the parking area. This is one of the waivers that we're addressing, and Rita actually has up on the board the adjusted site plan. Does this work? Did I turn it on? Hello? It shows the revised walkway, which comes in through here to the rear door that gains access to the building. The plan you have in your packet does not have a walkway there. So that waiver is removed from our petition.
That's waiver 1,
That's the first one on their list.
no longer needed.
No longer needed. The second one listed on your memo corresponds to the garage doors not being on the side of a building which fronts on a roadway. We have 3 roadways that we're fronting on, and they do want to have that garage bay door on Hamland Way. So that is a waiver that we do continue to have on the project, and that's functionality. If you have any questions regarding that, Kevin will be able to answer any of those questions, but we do want to retain that waiver.
I do have a question on it.
Sure.
Where it's located, it's hard to see on the plan, but I just want clarification on the, I guess on that plan, my eyes are killing me. What is the structure? So obviously that's a road or a paved surface.
This right here.
Take the microphone with you, please.
I can't get
Test 1.
No?
So it's a paved surface. You don't need to go, I guess I'm asking it's a paved surface, and then in front of the door, obviously, it's all paved, and it's a loading dock. What is that structure, the heavy line
That's
on the south end? Nope, the south part of
That's a trench drain.
Trench drain,
It's a
okay.
stormwater, basically a catch basin type thing that runs across the entire length.
What's,
But it's a trench, it's
okay,
shallow.
yeah, I thought it might be a retaining wall or something, but
No.
what kind of vehicles do they expect to go in and out of there? Is obviously,
Mostly it's going to be just cars parking there, but once in a while we will have some medium-sized trucks to deliver government equipment to us.
okay.
And that's why there's a garage door on two sides, because this side brings it up into a mezzanine, so there's a higher
Okay.
mezzanine recently, and this side brings it into the lower level.
And
So
that-
there's two levels in the building.
And that roadway on the south side just dead ends there, Lynn?
Yes, we provide, that is actually a garage door as well on the south side. So
No,
you,
I know that, I'm talking about the roadway.
oh yeah, we have that there just so they can turn around if they need to, or if fire needs to get over there.
How
But
wide is it?
I believe it's about 20 feet.
So 20 feet wide enough for a truck, but I guess it's a T, the truck can come down and back up and back in, okay, the fire truck,
Yeah.
okay. I guess while you're there, I have another question. You want to clarify something, Lynn?
Sure.
Did you want to clarify?
No, I was just double checking to see if I had that dimensioned anywhere.
So are you aware of any known issues with the existing lots that are there, the existing parking areas? You know, drainage-wise?
No, I'm not. Are you aware of
No.
any? No.
No.
Town's not aware of any, so I would imagine. So I guess what I was getting at is, are there any drainage
There's
structures there?
There's catch basins within the site. We do show that on the plan and to the, most extent possible, how the pipes work between those. Expect those discharged directly into the town right-of-way catch
Okay,
basin.
so there's no issues. I guess my only comment would have been is if there were, you could have addressed it by maybe moving that pond down and trying to capture some there, but there's no need, but that would have been an option. if you
Right,
could
yeah,
move it.
no, we don't know of any issues with the
Okay.
existing. So we left all of existing alone.
Okay, thank you.
Next waiver?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got so sidetracked. Loading docks. Oh, and there are 3 additional waivers that are relative to the addition of the building, all architectural, which Kevin can go through with you.
Yeah, the windows less than, not to be less than 20%. We'd like no windows since we're doing government equipment and stuff in there. We'd want to have the privacy for that. It's like a garage-like fixture on the back. That's where we'll be loading equipment in there, and we really don't want the public seeing it because of security reasons.
So, comment on that, not for nothing, but
Sure.
we recently required I guess, I'm gonna have to say it, aren't I, Peter? A faux window, simulated window on
Okay.
a project that could be done there as well. Doesn't have to be
Sure.
seen through, but how
Well,
many windows are we talking?
Yeah, I would offer, I share all these concerns. It is the corporate park.
Yeah, agreed. I mean,
So,
I'm not opposed to the waiver.
Let's be real there.
I'm not opposed to the waiver, I just,
Okay,
could be
guys.
done.
Sure. Okay, so that's number 4 on that list. The building exteriors and roofs shall be constructed or resemble traditional materials.
We have another question.
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm concerned, I'm a little confused about why we would want a window there, because we're just talking about parking area and drainage, right? As far as this,
You know, they need,
There's a small addition
okay.
proposed on the south side of the building, and the architectural waivers that are listed in the planning board memo are relative just to that small addition.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the building materials, we were just going to go with the current structure, match it. So it was steel beams and it's steel walls, and it does have a flat roof. That's number 5.
no, I know, it's buried up.
Oh, 5 and 6, I didn't notice the roof forms.
Right.
So that's actually addressing both.
And then the last waiver is the parking lot trees, which we did submit you a revised landscape plan to remove that request.
Do you have any equipment mounted on your roof?
Just, we have the air conditioners, of course, and we have a, I don't know what it's like a tower. It's a light tower that we constructed many, many years ago through the town, and it has some antennas on it.
That's the existing roof. Do you have
Except-
anything on the new roof?
On the new roof, no. No.
Other comments?
I
Joe?
was going to say, to the chairman's comment, to the extent that we could shield any rooftop equipment with this new addition, I think that's important to note.
Oh, okay. So if we have anything, so they mean if we have anything on the roof, you want to just block it?
Of the existing structure?
Well, the new addition, Joe.
Well, specifically the new addition.
Oh,
but
yeah, we
I
don't have
mean-
anything on the new addition
There's
roof.
nothing on the new.
All right.
Other comments?
There may be an air conditioner on it. That's
On the new structure?
on the new structure. There may, I've got to go back and look at the plan, but I thought there might be an air conditioner on it.
Any equipment that's on the new structure should be shielded from view from the street.
Okay, we
Okay.
can handle, we can do that, sir.
We'll put that in as a condition.
Sure, not a problem.
And shown on the plan, obviously.
Oh, of course, sir.
Any other comments from the board? Anyone from the public who would like to speak on this?
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. May I have a motion for a favorable recommendation on this application, including the addition of that additional condition of screening on the new building?
Motion is made.
Mr. Chair, this is not a recommendation, this is approval. It does not need any zoning, so it ends with the planning board. And I'll
Sorry, I
also-
can't
So
hear
it
you.
would be a motion to approve.
And I'll also note that there was one recommended condition of approval that is no longer necessary as well, since the landscaping plan has been updated, so they no longer need that. They no longer need the waiver request number 1 or number 7.
So the motion should be to approve this application, recognizing that waivers 1 and 7 are no longer needed, and under waiver 6, shielding will be provided on the new building.
Motion made to support that.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item 5C. Public hearing, application of MDR Realty 2 LLC for development plan review, including requests for waivers from certain design standards of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, Section 521, for construction of a new commercial building to be used as an auto dealership to replace an existing building at 1235 West Main Road, Assessors Plat 106, Lot 87.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Hold it.
Oh, sorry.
We have a motion to open the public hearing.
Sorry.
Motion made to open the public hearing.
Second.
Second. Motion is made and seconded to open the public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is open.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Matt Lees, representing the applicant MDR Realty 2 LLC. I have here tonight Mr. Mike Russell, who is the project engineer, Tom Sicoccio of Sage Environmental, who is the environmental engineer on the project, Pam Rogers, who is the landscape architect on the project, Herman Peralta, traffic engineer, and Mark Grenga, the general manager of BMW of Newport. MDR Realty owns property at 1235 West Main Road. The property consists of 2 lots, actually. One is Tax Assessor's Plat 106, Lot 87. And actually, if I'll just interrupt, Mike Russell will hand out some packets of materials here for reference during the presentation.
Where you have these?
Yeah, and these are materials that are also available electronically for the screen.
Thank you. So are these different from what we already received? We'll cover the changes? Yes. Thanks. So what I do...
It's okay. Thanks, Mike. As I was mentioning, MDR Realty owns the property at 1235 West Main Road. Property site consists of 2 lots, really. There's Tax Assessor's Plat 106, Lot 87, which is 3.5 acres, and Tax Assessor's Plat 112, Lot 14, which is 7.5 acres. The work that we're here for tonight involves the front lot, which houses the Cardi's store and until recently housed Sears. Prior to 2011, for many years, it housed an auto dealership as well. And there is still auto service that's done in the back of the building. Also on the front lot is parking. On the rear lot, Lot 14, is an extension of the parking, as well as stormwater facilities and a conservation easement area, as well as Bailey's Brook. There's no work being done to the parking lot in the back. Just some upgrades to the maintenance of the stormwater facilities. The plan that's before you tonight is to relocate the BMW of Newport from 1215 1199 West Main Road, which is just to the 2 lots just to the south of the subject property, up to 1235 West Main Road. There'll be a new modern auto dealership building as well as site work. The site, as I think you all know, is basically now a sea of asphalt that sort of slopes awkwardly to the back. There's no breaks, no landscaping or islands or anything of that nature, and the only structure is the Cardi's building. It's also, as you may recall, a remediation site. It had a leaking 10,000-gallon underground tank, which has been removed. However, which was associated with the auto dealer use years ago. However, the soils and groundwater are still impacted and are being treated, and there is an open DEM file. The removal of the building that will be associated with this project will give an opportunity to remove that soil and hopefully close the DEM file. The building itself, I believe there's a photo of the building itself, which you probably are all familiar with, is a circa 1960s low concrete building, fairly unattractive and outdated. It's 19,690 square feet in footprint. And the plan will be to take that building down, except for potentially, the hope is to save a south wall, part of the south wall of the building. The building will be pushed back from the street. Actually, if you could flip to the renderings, Rita. Great. Plan would be to push it back from the street. The building would be increased in size to 31,162 square feet. It'll be, as I mentioned, a modern auto dealership building that complies with BMW requirements. It'll be about 20 feet high to the canopy, which would be lower than the Sakuchi or Langway auto dealerships, which are in the nearby area. It will require some waivers, which are before you tonight. We did manage to add some things from when we were here at a concept review back in August. We are now screening the mechanicals that are on the top, which can be seen in the rendering there, the screening element. And we've added some windows to the south elevation to break up the long plane of wall. The site work that's associated with this project will involve regrading to build up the site, the area where the building is located so that it is level with the street. The project will in part use the old building ground up and used for fill. The grading will taper to the north so that the boundary on the north side, that the grading will match the boundary on the north, the property to the north. And as you go to the back of the property, there will be a drop in grade. There'll be about a 12-foot retaining wall, which will separate the upper part of the site from the lower part of the site. There'll be greenery added, mostly up front, where it'll have the most impact. Right now, there's 6.1% landscaping on the site. That'll be increased to 7%. There'll also be screening added along the northerly boundary line where the Crystal Spring business is located, as well as a residential use. As I mentioned, Pam Rogers, a landscape architect, is here who can answer any questions that anyone may have about the landscaping. As far as circulation goes, there are 3 entrances, 3 curb cuts associated, driveways associated with this site. The north and south drives will remain located as they are, and the central driveway will be relocated slightly to the north. We did receive from the Department of Transportation a physical alteration permit for that work. That can be discussed. We have a traffic engineer who can discuss any traffic issues, but we think that reflects the traffic safety issues have been addressed. Any traffic safety questions have been addressed for the site. And I believe you should have a copy of that physical alteration permit in your packet. Lighting will be dark sky compliant. There'll be no new utilities. The signage that we've submitted complies with the zoning ordinance. There's a service sign on the building, which under your zoning ordinance is approved through the development plan review process. It's internal directional signage. So that would be part of your approval tonight. That's shown on some of the renderings, just a proportional service sign above the service bays. The parking will go from 228 spaces to 190 spaces. Some spaces will be lost as we add islands and landscaping. Complies with the zoning ordinance. We've received a RIPDES permit relating to stormwater because there is over an acre of disturbance. Mike Russell can discuss that more as needed. We've also received an order of approval from DEM for the environmental remediation work, which Tom Sicoccio can discuss. As I mentioned, the physical alteration permit, and then on Monday we received unanimous approval from your technical review committee, subject to certain conditions which we'll be able to meet. We've also had discussions with the neighbor to the north, Mr. Ian Scott, who owns the Crystal Spring property, and we understand that he is satisfied with our proposal, with the plans, and he is here tonight. I'm sure he can speak as needed. So with that, I'll get into addressing the individual waivers shortly, but first I'd like to invite Mike Russell up to discuss the site work and the engineering associated.
Good evening, members of the board. Mike Russell, LDC Engineering Consulting, on behalf of the applicant. We served as the civil engineering consultant for the project.
Use the hand mic or raise the, yeah.
We served as the civil engineering consultant for the project. So I think Matt gave a pretty thorough general overview. One thing that I want to point out in the material I just passed out, we had a TRC meeting on Monday. There were a couple changes or a couple items that we added to this plan for presentation purposes, for clarity. I just want to point that out. The fire department had a comment on this particular access drive being a minimum of 20 feet. It was just short of that, so we adjusted the plan to reflect a 20-foot single pass. The other thing that we had added to the plan per Mr. Kane's comments was a building height calculation. This is not even close to exceeding the allowable building height, but we added that to the plan. And the other thing, just for clarification purposes for this meeting, for circulation, site circulation, we added some flow arrows based on the preferred intended circulation pattern for the dealership. So for customer access, everything is going to be through this relocated curb cut, and that was the basis of the permit with DOT, was to relocate this central curb cut about 30 feet to the north. The existing curb cut would conflict with the building expansion. So customers would enter through here, they park in the center, and they're able to access the building for service of their vehicles, and then exit out through the center access. They can park here, and they can circulate in this centralized area quite easily. As Matt mentioned, the overall parking is reduced from what it currently is. We're dropping about roughly 30 spaces, but per the planning department, and I think from our informational meeting back in August, we labeled the parking on the site. Rita, if we could advance one more sheet. Actually, I'm sorry. Can you go back one to the previous? One more forward. Site plan.
Three.
There. Just to point out a couple of the highlights in Matt's introduction. So, site lighting. There are currently poles on the property on the perimeter and internally. The plan is to leave the perimeter poles in place. Those fixtures will be replaced with dark sky compliant fixtures. The internal poles will have to get relocated based on this layout. Same idea, dark sky compliant fixtures. The landscaping, as Matt mentioned, is primarily focused in the front of the site. We have a limited amount of landscaping, but it is along the street frontage, in front of the building, and
Could you hold the mic up closer to you? Thank you.
it is along the street frontage, the front of the building. We have some stormwater practices that promote green space, and in the landscaping buffer, the limited landscaping buffer along the north boundary. So the proposal is to provide some infill, particularly abutting the residents, and then infill as necessary all the way to the rear of the property for screening. Now, Rita, we can go one forward. So the big permitting haul with this project was with DEM. It was an integrated process, as Matt mentioned, with waste management on the site remediation and also water resources on the stormwater. And they worked very closely together, scrutinized this project very, very closely, and essentially mandated certain types of stormwater practices. They classify this as a redevelopment project, which means we meet the state standards to the maximum extent practical. They were most concerned with stormwater quality because of the site remediation, the contamination, the remediation, proximity to Crystal Springs well, proximity to the wetlands, proximity to Bailey's Brook. So there was limited stormwater management on the site today. There's an existing oil water separator, which is the only collection system on the entire site. believe it or not. And then there is an existing detention basin that services this parking lot, which was expanded some 10 years ago, and then there's an existing stormwater facility just south of that. We added some landscaping features, some green space features, which are lined practices, because as Matt briefly mentioned, and Tom Sakoshi can talk about it in more detail, the idea is to treat and reprocess, treat, and use that material on site in the fill zone. As Matt mentioned, there are basically two levels to this site. There's an upper level, which we are raising the site, which is approximately the same elevation as BMW next door. If you looked at the two floor elevations, they're essentially the same. That's to get greater visibility to the showroom, the display vehicles, etc. The rear portion of the site is kind of where it is now. So the retaining wall is being incorporated to break that grade. The majority of the fill is in the closer to the building. As Matt mentioned, we are tapering grade down to the northerly boundary to meet that at that existing driveway that's along that boundary now. So back with the overall stormwater system, there are some line practices, landscaped islands that provide water quality treatment. We have a collection system, we have a structural practice for additional water quality treatment, and then we have refit one of the existing detention basins to provide additional water quality treatment. And one of the restrictions that DEM put on this permit was because of the site remediation, they wanted to restrict stormwater infiltration. They want the site essentially capped. So the existing landscaping or green space along the frontage is raised, it's retained by a curb. The landscaping around the building is raised and retained by a curb. And the same thing with these landscaped areas in the front of the site that are used for stormwater treatment. They don't want to commingle surface flow with the treated soil. And Tom can speak about that in more detail. So they restricted stormwater infiltration, which thus restricted the amount of permeable surface that we applied to the site, thus restricting the landscaping. I think that's it for a general overview of the site and the permitting of DM. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Mike, I've got a question for you. It's me over here. When you raise the grade up to the West Main Road level, about how many feet to the east will that go before you start to go in a downward?
Probably 12 feet at its highest. And then over the length of this driveway, there's a 8-foot drop.
So I would imagine you would need to have a pretty aggressive stormwater plan because you're going to have a grade there and probably an acceleration of stormwater, which would need to be dealt with before it hits the wetlands down there.
That's exactly correct. And the one thing to point out about that, along that, to that point, is the flow on this site has been greatly slowed down. Right now, it hits, a raindrop hits this corner right now, and it makes a beeline, that corner right there, straight to that structure. We have incorporated 3 different inlets capture systems way ahead of that point here in order to deal with that. So this slope, as you're pointing out, Mr. Weber, which is a fairly steep slope to get back down to grade, as soon as you round that corner, there's a catch basin. So that deals with that.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
You said you reduced the total number of parking spaces. When you did that by incorporating landscaping
islands?
That's part of it. The building expansion affected the reduction.
Where are the
site-
landscaping islands? When I look at the, some of these,
Rita, can you go back one, please? So islands per se, inside the site, there is 1, 2, 3 here. So 1, 2, 3. There's landscaping islands that abut the state layout here.
okay.
There's landscaping strips along the front of the building here, and then some smaller ones on the other side of the service entrance, and then one on the north elevation.
So the total impervious area is pretty much not changed from one?
Very slightly, we've upped the green space about 1%.
Okay.
But the green space, all of it is concentrated towards the front. And we can, I know Matt wants to, at some point during this presentation, go through the waiver request. I think there's going to be some justifications provided for those, for the waivers associated with landscaping.
You have other presentations?
Yes, I was going to call up Tom Sicoccio from Sage Environmental.
Tom Sicoccio with Sage Environmental. There should be a couple of plans in there. Back in the late 90s, there was a 10,000-gallon gasoline tank removed from this property. See if I can make this work. The gasoline tank was situated in here. Is there a plan before this?
Sorry, what?
Is there a plan before this, one with a lot of colors on it?
This one?
Okay. This is where the tank formerly existed. It was pulled out in approximately 1998. There was some contamination found at that time. DEM issued a leaking underground storage tank status for the site. A significant amount of monitoring went on. This tank was removed under previous ownership of the property. The last time this property was redeveloped, there was a significant amount of investigation done, and the plume extended further than anyone had imagined it would. There's been an extensive amount of remediation done to date. There's been multiple soil removal efforts where the tank existed. There's been removal efforts to the east of the building and to the south of the building. These colors are the existing contaminants, Vtex and naphthalene that DEM is most concerned about. These pink areas are predominantly exceedances of DEM's GA drinking water criteria. GA is protective of the drinking water, the brook, and Crystal Spring. As you can see, there's a easterly flow component with some of a southeast component, excuse me, to the south of the building. This is likely because during one of the previous excavation efforts, there was an underground injection structure found there that was dug out. Now that soil is more permeable than the native materials, so it's acting as a sump, we'll say, underground. Okay, you can go to the next slide. The contamination has come to be located beneath the existing structure. There's significant gasoline constituents under the building that, although we have dug this out, the groundwater is coming under the building, picking up the contaminants and bringing it to the other side. So with this proposal, we're going to go after all of that contamination under the building, and basically we're going to dig to about 15 feet, which is where we found bedrock the last time. We'll be extracting water from the eastern side of the building, which, rather than treat and discharge, we're proposing, well, DEM's approved shipping it off-site for treatment in Massachusetts. Basically, they take it in, they treat it, they send it to a cogeneration facility that cools, uses it in their cooling towers, and the water goes back into the atmosphere, and the contaminants get burned out. So we felt that was a good proposal rather than taking the risk of discharging something. So basically, we'll clean to bedrock. As part of their stipulation for approval of our remedial program, DEM wants us to dig some more of this out, because as you've seen, some of the water has carried some of the gasoline contamination onto this side of the building. So while this excavation, the building's going to come down, and we'll start digging. While the digging's happening, we'll have a scientist in the field with a piece of equipment called a photoionization detector, taking real-time readings against the DEM standard. Their standard is 20 parts per million. Soil that's below 20 parts per million can stay. Anything above it has to go off and be treated, as I'll explain later. We propose to DEM to use what's called the retech process. All the contaminated soil will be stockpiled in 250 cubic yard piles. It will be put in a screw auger to homogenize the material. It will then have Portland cement added to it and an asphalt emulsion. It's been used multiple times in the state of Rhode Island. The first time it was used was up the street at the former RIPTA facility back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's been an effective process. Basically, it results in a solid slab of material. So the water cannot percolate through it. It binds all the contaminants into it, and it's compliant with all of DEM soil standards, which include direct exposure and leachability standards.
Question on that? Okay, Paul?
Yeah.
Question on that? So
Yeah.
that process of whatever it's called, pulling the contaminated soil and putting it in the parking area, I'm assuming there are pretty extensive safeguards. Obviously, we have crystal spring water right
Yes,
next door.
yes.
So last
I'll
time-
explain that. DEM held us to some pretty.
Yeah, I mean, just taking the contaminated soil out is one thing, and putting it in the parking lot's another. I'm assuming the precautions are pretty extensive to protect, even temporarily, what's going on.
Yes, DEM requires that everything be on plastic and covered with plastic.
Monitored.
Yeah.
Who monitors that?
What do you mean by
So
monitoring?
who
We'll have
oversees that?
sedimentation, erosion control around all the
Understand,
piles.
Who oversees the day-to-day process of that? Is that?
We'll have a scientist on site documenting everything that happens. DEM will have to approve a closure report that we'll submit to them after this whole process is over.
Yeah, that concerns me, but what concerns me is the process, and because you're really taking the contaminated soil and moving it closer temporarily. That process is a little concerning.
This is stabilizing the soil and solidifying it. And
Understood, it's gonna be good, but in the process of taking contamination from one spot to another, you know, stuff happens and you're gonna make it better, but.
The benefit of
That's
that.
my question, though, telling me that it's going to be, the process is monitored and much protected, so I'm okay with it.
Yes.
BJ?
I'm in agreement with Bill, because I know the property at High Street, the nursery that was there, all the contaminated soil had to be removed and taken over to Massachusetts, but it was done at that time. My concern is that when it's dug up, shouldn't it just be taken off right then and there as best as possible?
There's very little risk involved because contaminants will be bound up, and there's a significant amount of fill required to raise this area. So that's why we proposed to DEM that we use this material up here.
Well, I know how careful DEM is even today with the property at the park. We cannot even touch anything surrounding those trees that have been planted, and everything that has been planted immediately had to be taken away. So,
Yes.
you know, they're very, very observant.
Yes, they are. And They would never have approved this if they weren't confident that would work. We've done a pilot test on it. We've taken soil from the hottest areas. They've drilled wells. They allowed us to do borings out here. We sent it off. It was mixed with concrete. We have analysis that shows these materials are bound up in it, that they're no longer leaching out of it. And because they're not
When
leaching,
does that binding occur?
what's that?
When does that binding occur?
As it's being excavated.
As it's being excavated. Does that mean when the soil, once the soil is out of the ground,
Yeah.
it's bound?
Yeah, they'll take it out from under the building, bring it, stockpile it, they'll feed it into a screw hopper, pug mill it, and then...
So it
it's-
goes to a stockpile somewhere, and then it's treated to bind the chemicals?
Yeah, it's basically
Where
just
will
to-
that stockpile be?
They'll be in 250 cubic yard piles throughout this area.
I mean, as I understand the questions here, they're not so much concerned about the as-built situation, it's the process of getting it there. So what happens in that stockpile before it's treated and bound?
You'll have an excavator digging it out here, putting it in here, a front-end loader will pick it up, bring it over, and either stockpile it or dump it right into the screw. The screw will homogenize it, there'll be a series of conveyor belts. A pug mill will drop the cement in it, the asphalt emulsion will be applied, it'll come off treated. They'll pile it again on plastic, cover it with plastic to prevent infiltration. It sits for 4 days, we collect samples, we send it to the lab, and if it tests compliant with DEM standards, we can then use it as backfill. If it doesn't test compliant with DEM standards, they gave us an additional opportunity to retreat it and stockpile it once again and test it over again. We've done significant sites with this. We have never had a sample fail.
Okay. On that note, so you gotta understand why it's concerning. I mean,
I totally understand.
Satisfying DEM is one thing. Satisfying the planning board is another thing. Frankly, satisfying the abutter who's here tonight and has clearly a vested interest, and as we do, because we all drink Crystal Spring water.
Yes,
Full disclosure.
understood.
Yes.
I'm assuming you've had discussions with him and that entity, because,
Mr. Scott?
yeah.
Yes,
I'm
we've
assuming
discussed.
maybe he'll speak to it, but not necessarily now, Ian, but that's a concern. I think you're taking contaminated soil, bringing it closer to the water supply. That's a little startling, hearing it for the first time, but I'm sadly not uncomfortable with the process, but it's just different to hear, and knowing that Crystal Spring, which is right next door, is concerning. That's how I
Yes.
see it.
Can you move? Oh, no, this is the one I need. As part of the approval process, there'll be a monitoring well installed here, here, and here. As you can see, the Crystal Spring, it's not really a well, it's a spring,
Sure.
is here. DEM is requiring that we put these wells in and test groundwater on a continuous basis, quarterly, every 3 months, to make sure that this is in fact not bleeding towards Crystal Spring.
Those wells go in prior to?
This is gonna have to go in
That's
after.
But really the ones that are closest to
We
the
put them in after because most of these wells will be destroyed during the excavation effort.
All right, so, yeah, so it's just,
But anything that's destroyed in here, DEM's requiring us to reinstall
Sure.
afterwards to continue monitoring groundwater.
Go ahead,
So I want to be really careful. I want to make sure I got this exactly perfect. So the big excavator digs that crap out of the ground. And when you say stockpiling, when I think about stockpiling, a mound of crap in the parking lot. But stockpiling is actually going to be inside that container. So you dig up the dirt,
Yeah.
okay? And it goes directly to whatever that thing with the screw is. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be in the excavator, and then it's going to be encased in that device that turns it into something.
Typically, they'll build a ramp into the excavation. The excavator will swing, drop it. A big balloon-tired front-end loader will go in, pick it up in its bucket, bring it over, and dump it in the screw compressor.
Okay, so it's stockpiling to me means you got to pile that stuff in the parking lot.
Once it's treated, it will be stockpiled.
oh, that's the key.
Okay.
That makes me feel better.
Oh.
You did say that first.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
That clarifies a lot.
It needs to be stockpiled after treatment so we can sample it,
Understood.
get our results back and say, yes,
Yeah,
DEM,
makes
this
sense.
is compliant and
All right.
we can use it as backfill.
I think everybody feels
That's
a
a
little
big,
relieved.
that's a
Sorry,
big
I didn't understand that,
Yeah.
was what you were worried about.
Go ahead.
So we'll continue monitoring groundwater to make sure that everything is reducing in concentrations. We've seen, since we excavated these areas, we've seen over 90% reduction in groundwater concentrations. So we've had a huge benefit on the property. These blue lines are what are called injection laterals. That's a contingency. If the groundwater doesn't clean up, there's food grade chemicals that we can add that will help polish the groundwater, we call it. It just takes some of the low levels and converts them into less toxic, non-toxic materials. And again, that's food grade products. DEM has approved that, and will also treat the bedrock surface with these products after the excavation to help promote the natural degradation of the petroleum constituents.
Joe?
Question. What are you backfilling the hole with?
We'll probably just bring in material from a commercial source. You know, rather than use that up here, we'll use that down here.
And what's the estimated time for the remediation?
The time?
Timeline to do the remediation?
They'll be able to treat 400 to 500 cubic yards of material a day. We estimate 4,000 to 6,000 cubic yards of material. So, and I assume that once this building comes down, the remediation is going to start right away. You know, I would assume they'll start demolition here and move towards the street.
Is there any remediation on the inside of the building that's required? Asbestos or anything like that?
Since the last meeting, since the last time we were in front of the board, we've completed a hazardous building material survey. There is some asbestos. Can you go to the next slide? Actually, the asbestos is pretty small in quantity. This green line, this blue line, there's asbestos in the caulking on the windows, and there's asbestos on a few of the roof lines. I think roof C, and possibly roof A. 2 inches, yeah, ACM. So we're putting in a demolition permit. There's been an asbestos abatement plan developed already that's going to the Rhode Island Department of Health for approval. We've tested the building materials for metals and PCBs. There's no PCBs or metals present at PCBs, there's none. No metals at concerning levels. And as a component of this, the building's going to be ground up and used as...
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Do you have any?
When the material that we were talking about before, you know, that gets stockpiled,
Yep.
it gets stockpiled on some plastic.
Yep.
And what happens if you got a heavy rain coming? Is there anything to kind of contain it, you know?
Yeah, there'll be sedimentation, erosion control
Yeah, okay.
procedures in place.
Covered.
Yeah, it'll be covered, and there'll be
Covered past with tarps and things like that?
hay bales, siltation fence, and
Okay.
yeah, there'll be.
Do you have more to present?
No. Nope.
I just had a couple quick questions for Mr. Sicoccio. Mr. Sicoccio, would you be able to remove all the impacted soil if the building did not come down?
No. Nope.
And
DEM has been pushing for this since '98. They actually tried to push the previous owner to take the building down, but it just wasn't economically feasible to push their service center out of business and rip down a building to rebuild it. And, now they're very excited about this opportunity to get at this material. Unfortunately, the former DEM project manager has retired, and that was kind of one of her goals, was to see this site come off of DEM's list. So, that's all I have.
Any other comments, questions?
Not for him, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
As indicated earlier, we have some waivers that we're going to be, go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, before you do that, I want you to do the waivers, if you don't mind. And Mr. Chair, if I could, can I ask a couple of questions on the, just the site itself, before we get to the waivers, and Mike, if you could. So I like what you've done with, on the plan showing, if you could go to the plan, Rita, the first plan, with the, there you go, that's it. I like what you've done with the circulation of the property. So let me ask, does this site, does this project need any zoning relief?
No.
No zoning relief, so we're the be-all and end-all here.
Correct.
So, relative to the circulation, we have certainly have some leeway here. I like what you've done by putting it on the plan, I guess, and relocating the driveway. I'd like to see you continue showing the circulation, the south driveway. Let me back up another second. This is a BMW dealership, and the only servicing of vehicles in the service area will be for the BMWs. Is there any trans between the dealerships? Will there be any? I guess I'm looking, because the circulation is where I'm going. Is the dealership that's next door, which is yours also, is there cross circulation? I guess I'm looking for more of a, continue what you've already done on the circulation, but with that south driveway, and then also the north driveway, it looks like that's a one-way. So there's a couple of questions I asked her, I know that. But.
Sure. Rita, can you, is it possible to pull this up so we can see the entire driveway on the south? Or maybe shrink it, zoom out?
That's okay.
Okay. So, to answer your question on the south driveway, so between the building, south elevation of the building, which we're holding, and the property line, there's almost 29 feet.
See that?
Okay, so Mr. Gringa can speak to this in more detail, but the intent is to keep the BMW operation only accessing this service, this south drive, if that answers your question. Regarding the north drive, the pattern is for BMW operational vehicles, for lack of a better word or phrase. The idea is to enter in the south drive in a counterclockwise horseshoe pattern around the building and then exit out through the north drive. That they would like to reserve that for BMW operational service vehicles only. Customer parking, customer access will be through the center access only.
Okay, so one, I'd like to see you put that circulation pattern onto the plan, like you've done already, a portion of it on the south drive.
Okay, so to make that clear?
And make it clear, and going around the building, and identify it as you know, if it's going to be for BMW service vehicles only, I think it should be noted that way, or BMW operations. That doesn't concern me as much, but I'd like to see the circulation pattern put on. And we all know, because you're telling us, that that's going to be the main entrance. How do people know to go in there versus the north driveway, which is very close to the Crystal Spring or the residents of Crystal Spring? I just want to avoid any potential, I know the driveway is wide enough there, but if you, I almost like to see a sign saying one way or no entry, because you know, I guess.
That's a fair question, and that was discussed with our team more than once. And I think Mr. Gringa will attest to that. We plan on putting appropriate signage to make that happen.
Okay, to make what happen? To make
to identify customer entrance, to identify BMW service entrance and exit.
Okay.
That type of thing. You know, if you know, I think any conditions that the board imposes along those lines would be perfectly acceptable.
I'd like to see that, frankly, I'd like to see that, because aren't service signage, isn't it governed by zoning? The size of these signs and entry signs and...
Perimeter directional signage, I believe, is actually exempt signage under your zoning ordinance, so enter here is not something that's counted towards, for example, your square footage requirements.
Okay, but it's just an entry sign, it can be any size. I guess I'd like to see it, because I'd like to make sure that we're not, I mean, I know how these things go. I know how dealerships need signage, and many times what we end up seeing is BMW of Newport entry, and that's signage. Not that I want to prohibit that, but I also don't want to see a, 10 square foot sign there versus, a more realistic looking sign that's all that's necessary. So I'd like to see what your signage plan is.
They show some signs in here.
Yeah, we did submit some signage materials, building signage. I don't think we have the directional signage on those materials.
I know, okay. So I guess I'd like to see where they are, I'd like to see them on the site plan. Let's start with that, and the, okay, yeah, those are just regular identifying signs, right?
What's that? Yeah, there's on your elevations, you would see, I believe.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the design, and I think it all fits within what we're trying to do here, but the location of them, and to more talk about the point of the north driveway, where to avoid any kind of, did DOT speak to that at all on their, to relocate, that be prohibited to it in exit only, or in? The north driveway, I guess, is more.
Perhaps I could call the traffic engineer up,
that'd be great.
Mr. Peralta, and he could perhaps also describe the type of signage that would be recommended to serve as directional signage for these driveways.
Before he starts, did you have a question that relates to this topic or the previous topic?
No, I would be very much interested in the landscaper.
All right.
That's
Okay.
my thing.
Sure, we can get to that.
But you haven't gotten to it
Okay,
yet.
we'll get to that, right. Mike?
What am I looking at there? Am I looking at some sort of a roadside sign there, with a...
That's yes, that is the monument sign that will be on the road. That
on the plan.
complies with the,
Is it
yes,
on the plan? It is.
complies with the
Yeah.
sign ordinance.
Is it on the, which...
Three of 10. You got to look to the north of the main entrance. Okay. There's two little pillars and a sign. It's right there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's all fits within what I think is appropriate. I didn't see anything though.
Hold on a second, Mike's got
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, the planning board is asked to look at a lot of these commercial designs and to encourage, architectural styles that reflect New England style elements in them. And, when I look at this, I was just wondering, does BMW have any suggested architectural styles for regional areas that might reflect, the architectural elements that are, standard or not standard, but, mostly used in those areas?
Mr. Grenga can speak to the BMW requirements, and which I was intending to do once we get into the waiver discussion, but he can do that now if you like to do that.
Hold on, because Bill wants to
I could wait on that.
pursue his.
Yeah, I wanted to stay on that topic of where the signs are and where the circulation. More clearly defining the circulation on the plan. So I see the main entrance, the sign is there, that's fine, but I guess back to the north entryway. Is there a plan to prohibit entry there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be accommodated quite simply with do not enter signs.
Speak to the microphone, please.
One way, do not enter?
One way, do not enter, service vehicles only, cut that, I mean, that, pretty standard. I mean, that's not an unusual request, and could easily be accommodating.
Okay. So I'm going to request 2 additional conditions. One would be to clarify the, further spell out the circulation pattern and identify the signage necessary on the, at the north entryway, north driveway. Because it's really an exit way, not an entryway. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
If I could ask Mr. Nash just one question. In terms of further clarifying the circulation, was that a reference to the south driveway in particular?
Yeah, just putting the circulation arrows on the plan and identifying them as being the circulation pattern preferred, or how you intend it to be used, operational, customer access, service access.
I see. Okay.
Next
Okay.
presentation.
Well, we could speak more about the directional signage, but if it's satisfactory to you, it could be a condition that we put that on the plan, that put the directional signage.
Sounds like it will be a condition.
That sounds like that. So I will not ask the traffic engineer to get up and speak.
Okay.
Ms. Owen commented on the landscape architect. She is here. I can call her up. If you would like to come up, Ms. Pam Rogers, the landscape architect.
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Pamela Rogers with Verde Design, landscape architect.
Have you had an opportunity to speak to some of the people on the tree commission? Have they seen your plans? The reason I ask this is because one of the problems, it seems to me, on West Main Road is that it is awful, it is dull, it needs some joie de vivre. Maybe in my mind it needs some landscaping, maybe smaller signs, whatever. But I was wondering whether or not you had an opportunity to really do something with the design, with the landscaping. Now, I don't mean tall trees, I mean something that would be a nice, elegant way to enter into this project, because it can be very nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that what we attempted to do was try to do that without adding the trees, which I think is one of the waivers you were asking for. So I think as far as we were concerned, with massing of evergreens and native plants and grasses that were common to, you know, our coastal area, is what we tried to do. And I think that will provide for a very nice, in my opinion, and complementary entry.
Has that been passed by the tree commission?
It wasn't requested. We
I'd
didn't.
like to request that.
Sure.
Okay.
So how, good question, BJ.
Yes.
The plans that you all submitted tonight, how reflective of the plan is this? Is it just
Is the graphic and the rendering?
Is it just a filler, or is it pretty close?
I think it's somewhat close in the sense that it is a similar height, but we did complement it with more textures and other species as well to make it more interesting. So it's not exactly reflective.
Yeah, if you could run it by the tree commission, because we have some very, very interested and expert landscapers too, with you're very good at what you do, and they are too, and they may just have some additional suggestions.
You mean
But-
suggestions as far as specific plant material? Or?
Yes, that would be part of it. Also, our the tree warden of the town is a member of that too. So he would be very much interested.
Okay. I would imagine we didn't think of that only because we don't have a lot of trees on the
Well, it's not just trees.
all
I mean,
landscaping.
it's
Okay.
any kind of landscaping throughout
Sure.
a development.
Okay,
Thank
Okay.
you
no
very
problem.
much.
You're welcome.
So, if the board would like, I will now go through the waivers that have been requested, which are listed on the staff report prepared by Ms.
Before you
Lavoy.
go through the waivers,
Pardon me?
before you go through the
Yes.
waivers, I have a question. Glenn.
Yes.
When you started your presentation, you mentioned that the design was in compliance with BMW requirements,
Correct.
but it's not really in compliance with Town of Middletown requirements.
Correct.
And Town of Middletown, in their ordinances and in their comprehensive plan, called for New England-style buildings.
Correct.
Now, I realize a New England-style building for an auto dealership is a challenge. Did you do anything with that challenge, or did you just ignore it?
Well, I can call up Mr. Grenga to discuss
Please.
exactly what the requirements that BMW has and what the flexibility is there.
Well, the flexibility doesn't matter, because we hear this with everybody. Everybody comes in and says, these are our corporate requirements. Well, we have town requirements, okay? And you have to comply with those. That's what the ordinance is. So I'd like to hear your position on the design.
My position on the, first of all, I'm Mark Granger, General Manager at BMW Newport. My position on the design is, and I know you've heard this before, but as a franchise dealership, we're a franchise of the BMW North America. Part of our dealer agreement with that manufacturer is to meet certain facility requirements, and one of the conditions of the sale of BMW, or the buy-sell of BMW Newport, was a letter of intent to build what BMW calls a future retail concept facility. Dealers that are not in compliance have to sign a letter of intent. So the building that we're in right now is not compliant, is a non-compliant building, that current BMW of Newport, because it does not meet those design standards. In the event that we cannot comply with the BMW design standards and honor our letter of intent to build a future retail concept building, there are a few options that BMW could take. One is to terminate our dealer agreement. Two would be to penalize us financially, a substantial financial penalty on a monthly basis until we become facility compliant. So I completely understand that the town also has their requirements. However, as far as being a franchisee of a manufacturer and our financial well-being being tied into that manufacturer, we really are stuck between, we have no other option other than to build that facility.
Let me just ask a follow-up question. I appreciate your candor, by the way. The requirements that BMW gives to you as part of the franchise, do they require this design? Or let me finish my question, please. Or are the requirements something that you can design into another building design?
No, so they require that design. This design intent booklet that you have, that's basically what you're looking at, is provided by BMW's architects. So they came, they assessed the site, they provided us with this design intent. It had to be approved by BMW. We were allowed to make, obviously changes since we're, it is our building, but only within those design specifications.
Well, again, I appreciate your candor, and I do admit it's a big improvement over what's there now. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah. Looking at, the design architecture, the key element, I'm looking at the various renderings. Let's take that one, for example, the glass enclosure where the new cars are going to be displayed. I'm assuming that's probably the key element that
the showroom.
The showroom that BMW
yeah.
weighed in on. Again, not being an architect, but looking at the different renderings that are in the package, I'm just curious if there might be some modifications that could be made to the facade of the service area and some of the other portions outside the showroom area that could be compatible with a more appropriate design element, and you kind of have your cake and eat it too.
I agree. I'm on that.
So, all right. Again, candor. The service area to the left of the showroom, it's a basic white box with no architectural detail. Granted, it's service. But there's probably something an architect could look at to add some elements to that would certainly go a long way to satisfying the intent of what our regulation states. And if I were to walk around and spend a tremendous amount of time with the plans that we just got, I'm sure could come up with some other elevation exposures where you could do the same thing, not taking away from the main design element that BMW is stipulating that you have to have. So I know it's a balancing act, but I think there could be maybe some tweaks that
I know that this may not sound may not sound feasible to someone who's not dealing with a automobile manufacturer. But if you look through the entire design booklet, it's not just the showroom. It's down to the specific tiles that need to be used in certain areas of the dealership, to the signage, to those specific garage doors.
Yep.
The exterior finish, color, interior paint colors, carpet manufacturer and color, and even the furniture down to the office chairs are specifically compliant to BMW, the manufacturer. And anything that does not comply will put us in what's called a CORA violation. And I've already explained to you what.
Respectfully to Joe, I know what you did.
I'm not suggesting that you cause any financial harm and get into a violation situation with the manufacturer. But if one were to say, the BMW design booklet specifically states we need a blank white wall, square white wall. I mean, I'm not talking garage doors, I'm not talking tiles, I'm not talking office furniture, I'm not talking showroom.
Yeah.
But again, I'm looking at a pure vanilla box.
Correct.
To the left-hand side. So
the
regulation sets we need boring pure vanilla.
Yes. Yes.
For your showroom, and it can't have any design element whatsoever.
Yes.
Frankly, I'd rather see the window design carried around. If you're going to go that route, I'd rather see that in the block.
Okay. So they basically want every BMW dealership to look exactly the same, whether you're in Newport, Rhode Island, or Newport, California. Yep. That's their goal. We're not allowed to put our name on the dealership. It must remain, as you know, BMW of Newport. My experience with them, I can tell you, we would have to go another route. I mean, we hung out, we put out 2 exterior lights in the front of our entrance way to open, you know, the front entrance to our doors to the showroom. They were just a, you know, nice little architectural light that we wanted to add. BMW rep came down, said it's not compliant, you need to take them down. Down to the light fixtures.
So I understand all that. Maybe not to the extent you do for sure, but we did have a concept meeting. We did kind of lay that out, and we all kind of said, we don't want to see the box, we don't want to see it, and so we're in this tug of war. Let me finish. The other item that came up at the concept meeting and is the south wall. Is there not a provision, a waiver that they may need for the south wall, for an unbroken wall? So that was, and I know because I brought it up, I know that there's a visual thing there, but I guess my question is, one, I think there should be a waiver, and 2, I don't know if I'd support the waiver, which goes along with the whole design of the building in general, which goes along with, frankly, respectfully, we sat here at the concept meeting and said to you all, this is what we don't want to see. I could live with the window BMW area, but it's almost like you took this window box and put it there, and then you just stuck all these concrete service areas behind it, and frankly, that to me is not in compliance with what Middletown is trying to accomplish. I think you need to go back to...
We did change the continuous wall. We did that's the new rendering on the south wall.
And then, does that mean? No, it's the... Yeah, that's my question, Rita. It's the unbroken wall, right?
Yeah, there's a 40 feet of unbroken
The
wall.
windows qualify? They do.
Yeah, well, there's also another element that the applicant had indicated that the south wall was to remain, so that's why there wasn't a waiver looked at the south wall at all. But if there is a possibility that the south wall will not remain, then perhaps a waiver should be discussed.
Well, one way or another, if it's going to remain or not, it's in this, you know, it's virtually coming down and then going back up.
Well,
It's an unbroken wall.
my understanding was that it wasn't going to come down, that it was going to stay up.
But they're putting windows in, and to you, you believe that satisfies the unbroken wall requirement? Is that your opinion?
Windows break the pane.
Windows break the pane?
Yeah.
Okay, fair. But I think, again, we're back to, as Joe brought up, and I think we all kind of feel a little uncomfortable with the block white building behind the nice-looking big window structure that's going to be a showpiece. I don't know. I think you need to make another attempt, in my eyes.
Well, with all due respect, we did have a preliminary meeting in August, and we presented these exact drawings and renderings, and one of I believe the suggestions were to break up the south wall and to close in something on the overhead units, on the air conditioner, on the HVAC system. If we had known in August that this building, which again is the BMW requirement, could not be built on that property, we would not have invested the money to get to this point.
But I'll give you the south wall, you've met that requirement, and
Yeah.
I'll give you the coverage of the units, you've done that. But we also made an impression upon, this is the Middletown building.
I want to hear BJ and then Mike. Let's get some other comments here.
Yes, I realize everything that's being said, but I would like to remind the board that we have had Honda and Toyota come before us in the past, and we have had discussions about this exact same thing. And I can recall that although we did not like some of the things that were presented to us, ultimately the question was, did we want Toyota in Middletown or did we want Honda in Middletown? And that's what it came down to. So I think we're all torn by not liking some of the designs. I just question that fact. I think we've all been down this road, or those of us who are on the board before, we've had these considerations before, and it's a tough decision.
Well, when I
White
pulled,
block wall?
Hold on. Mike, then John, and then Art.
One of the typical elements you see in New England architectural design is fieldstone walls, and I know in the front there you have those low bushes. I've seen in some car dealerships they have the low fieldstone walls there. You know, and maybe at the entrance, maybe a fieldstone gate. Those are possible New England style architectural elements you could add, you know, to possibly satisfy it. But I agree that, you know, on the service entrance on that north wall, it looks pretty, you know, something's got, it looks a little bare.
It's the white block wall, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
White block wall?
Which,
With the north wall, because that's, of course, the south wall.
Well, I'm looking at the north side. I like I think you met the requirements for the south wall.
Okay.
You know, I just, on the north side, on the service entrance area,
could you just
It
go
looks
to the,
pretty
I think
bare
it's
there.
on the next screen.
that's the west side, that's the west rendering. See the service entrance there with the two
The two garage doors?
doors, yeah.
Yeah.
And that wall just extending on the north side of it?
Oh, facing north.
Yeah.
I mean, keep in mind that that'll be set back quite a ways from the street, so you won't, if you're coming down West Main Road, it won't be very visible. That's a concern. I don't know whether windows can be added.
Yeah, that is gonna be a service drive, yeah.
It'd almost look better if you had some signage on it, I think, you know, it's.
Yeah.
Well, I would
dressed
like to
up, you
put,
know.
Yeah, the sign.
well, we wanted
Yeah,
to
the
put
signage
signage on
will
it.
go over the
We're at our limit. As a matter of fact, the original plan called for more
Right, I can
signage.
see it, it's on the plan, it says service over it. That actually looks better. It's right there, yeah.
We could request, windows.
Yeah,
We could
windows
request windows there.
Okay. John, then Art.
when I go to Sakuchi and pull in, I don't exactly feel like I'm pulling into New England Village.
Great.
Thank you. And how many people do you employ?
50.
Good pay, good wages,
Very, very good.
pay taxes in Middletown?
Yes, also on property and on our 50 registered loaner vehicles.
Some of your workers live in Middletown?
Many do.
We have no,
So, look,
He's got the floor. And
I've had to meet a payroll. I know what it's like to lose a distributorship. He's trying to make a living, along with 50 other people. I'm firm believer in the village concept, but at the same time, I don't want to see a business move out of Middletown. And that's what I have to say.
Well, I've got, it's not gonna make any difference here, but you could have a goddamn log cabin there. It's the product and the people that make you successful. Am I correct?
I agree.
I mean, that could be awful, and you would sell just as many cars. I never go to a place because I like the building. And if I went to Monterey, California, or I went to Stowe, Vermont, or I went to Sturbridge, Mass., I don't know if they have a BMW dealership there. I'd be willing to bet you a huge sum of money they don't look exactly like that. So any little thing you can do to get around the edges, soften up a little bit, we would appreciate. And I share John's concern and the observations here. We don't have any car businesses from Middletown. They're all from Newport, right? Toyota, Nissan is Newport, Honda is Newport, and we're all really in Middletown. And they've had the same requirements to build their stores a certain way. I think Toyota and Nissan has a stone wall. I could be mistaken, but I think they have a stone wall in front. So any accommodation you can come up with that would take the remarks of the people here on this board, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. And we're, you know, we're more than happy to be a thriving business in Middletown for as long as possible. And we'd also like to have a, you know, good relationship with the town. So we will do whatever we can do. I understand what you're saying as far as soften it up, stone wall here. We will do what we can do to do that. I mean, I think aesthetically, obviously, we're investing a large sum of money in what we believe to be a beautiful building. But whatever we can do to make it more aesthetically pleasing, we will, within BMW's guidelines.
Well, I know you're selling a lot of cars, because I see that same guy's face in the paper every month.
Yeah.
He's selling hundreds of them himself.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the waivers.
So the waivers, as mentioned, are listed in the staff report prepared by Ms. Lavoie. The first waiver, 521.2A4, commercial garage doors are to be screened from public view. Due to the site circulation patterns, which we talked about earlier, and also due to the need to separate the service, where the customers come in, park their car for the service, and then access the customer areas of the building, really the garage doors are going to have to be visible from the street, and there's no way to screen them from the street without screening the inventory in the building and everything else. Mr. Grenga can speak more on that, or Mr. Russell as needed, but that's essentially the reason the garage doors are located as they are. It's just site constraints and requirements. The next waiver, 521.2B1, windows occupying essentially more than 60% of the facade visible from the public way. I think we just had a extended discussion upon why that is. It's the BMW requirements, and I think Mr. Grenga would also add that you know, a auto dealership wants to have a light, airy showroom, and that's why you have all that glass. The next waiver, 521.2C, this is building exterior and roofs to be traditional materials or resemble such materials. Again, we just had the discussion. Mr. Grenga described the consequences of not complying with the BMW requirements. Let's see here, 521.2D-13, flat roof. Again, that goes to the architecture of the building, which Mr. Grenga discussed as part of the BMW requirements. I believe the unbroken wall requirement has been remedied by the windows on the south. The next requirement is planted landscaping occupies.
Before you go to that one.
Yes.
The waiver number 4 also talks about shielding rooftop equipment.
Oh, yes.
Do I assume that in that rendering?
Yes, the rooftop equipment is shielded in this. We did add the screening, so that is, we did address that. Regarding landscaping, planted landscaping has to occupy a minimum of 25% of the project area. We went over the numbers earlier. The existing landscaping is 6.1%. We are going up slightly to 7%, so it is an improvement. It is all focused up front where it's most visible, but due to the requirements for parking, which I'll ask Mr. Grenga to get up and describe how the parking works at the site and why the parking spaces are really at a premium on that site. Yes.
Take the microphone, please.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
It coincides with the landscaping. I know we're having a discussion about this and how no one likes this. If we were to add a small bed, a narrow bed along here, and put some tall, like arborvitae type trees to break this all up.
Big improvement.
What's that?
Big improvement.
Okay, we're absolutely willing to do that. We'd only be giving up, a 3-foot length bed along here, and then we could put some real nice looking landscape in there. And that would add 2%, which means another 10%.
Yeah, Mr. Russell is confirming that that doesn't cause a problem in terms of the circulation area between the building and the parking, but
How about in the front? In the, to the right of the garage doors, can you do something similar there?
I'm going to pull up the site plan.
Yeah.
Yep.
It would be in here?
Yeah, if you look at the site plan, if you look at the, I mean, the rendering, the elevation, second elevation, and then
This is probably going to get mentioned here in one or more of the next landscape waivers discussed, but one of the things we have to be careful with the DEM permit is permeable space. So the landscaped areas away from the street and away from the north boundary that are associated with the stormwater are lined. So you have to be very careful what goes in there. They have to be something without a dominating root structure, and obviously trees, but anything of any size can't go in there. Along this area here, I'm not sure. I mean, I might defer to Pam on what the options are along that north face, and that would be the same here on the inset. There is a roof overhang there, so I'm not sure what would be appropriate there.
No.
I'm sure.
There's no overhang there. Not in this.
Or maybe a roof overhang would be nice there. Put it up.
Is there a bed there now, Mike, or
Well,
you're
I mean,
just
you can see
proposing?
there's, Mark, this is a door here? These are access.
This would be a delivery center, so these are glass.
No, I'm talking about to the
Right here.
To the, yeah, they're right there. You talk 2-3 feet out. There's
Here?
planting there, yeah.
I just need to look at the plan. I don't know if it'd be in the way of a doorway. Yeah, that. We would, well, I think it would be blocking this exit. That's a doorway, that's a drive out.
In the interest of saving some time here, you seem to be amenable to addressing some of these concerns with landscaping.
Yes.
And BJ has requested that a landscaping plan be sent to the tree commission to let them evaluate it. Could I suggest that you give this some thought? You've heard the concerns of the planning board. Develop your landscaping plan to address these issues and submit it to the tree commission.
as a condition of approval
Yeah.
of the development plan review.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we, we don't know, based on some of the
Is that-
issues we just discussed, DEM,
Is that okay?
you
Is that
know.
all right with everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Based on some of the issues we were discussing, and one of which I was about to get to, which is the DEM requirements of not having the infiltration, things like circulation distances for aisleways and so forth. There are some limits.
Comply with those anyway.
Yeah, no, right. So we'd be some constrained in those regards, but we could certainly work with the tree commission to see what we can do with landscaping.
Good. So let's move on to the next.
Okay. 521.3 C, screening elements along all property lines. The site is essentially, as I described earlier, is...
The next one I have is 521-3. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry. You're right.
The site, as I described earlier, is essentially there's two tax lots. there's an extension of the parking lot to the east of the subject lot. And so you really couldn't put screening along that boundary line because it would block that parking lot. Likewise, on the south, there is a driveway that is in part shared with the neighboring property to the south. It's mostly on the 1235 lot, but that would also, you really can't put screening along that existing driveway, down that existing driveway. So that's sort of a unique site issue that would prevent that. The next one is 521.3D1, landscape buffer of at least 10 feet is provided along all property lines. Essentially that, same points that I just made regarding the lot kind of combinations there. Also on the north, it's not 10 feet of vegetated buffer, landscape buffer, but it's an existing condition, and we are going to be improving it with more landscaping. Mr. Scott, who is here, is, I think, satisfied with what we've proposed along that boundary line. Next one is 521.3D2. When abutting a residential district or use, the buffer must be at least 20 feet and include screening at least 6 feet high. We do have, the screening will be actually over 6 feet high. I believe the trees will grow up, as I understand it, to at least 20 feet high pretty quickly, and then above that could get as high as 30 feet. However, it's not 20, there's not 20 foot of width available there because of the existing driveway. But again, we are improving that situation, and we believe the neighbor is satisfied. 521.3D3, landscape buffer of at least 10 feet wide provided between the buildings and parking lots, driveway, etc. We do have that satisfied along the front of the building. However, as you can see just in that rendering, there are entrances and exits and driveways which prevent you from having it all around the building. We did just have a discussion about potentially adding it along the north side of the service block there, which we'll look into. Likewise, on the south, because of that driveway, the drive on the south, there's no opportunity to do that along the south. The next waiver request, 521.3F1, regarding deciduous trees. We're not providing deciduous trees because this being an auto dealership, you have a lot of cars sitting for extended periods of time. Deciduous trees would generally run the risk of damaging the car finish. Also, deciduous trees block the visibility of the inventory, which is the cars that are sitting in the parking lot. You also have some limitations, which Mike could probably describe better, of trees given the DEM limitations. 521.3F2, again, relates to trees. Parking lot trees are supposed to have 1 tree for every 5 parking spaces. Again, same comments as referenced above with the deciduous trees also, and I'm going to ask Mr. Grenger to get up again in a moment to describe the parking requirements for this site, which are pretty unique and extensive, would prevent you from losing more parking spaces. He's at a minimum of parking spaces right now that he needs. And those are, I think that was the list that we had on the staff report. So with that, actually, Mr. Granger, could you come up and just describe a couple things? Could you please describe for the board the parking demands on the facility?
Well, as a new car dealership, we're required to have vehicle inventory, as you can imagine. So on average, we have about 120 new BMWs in stock. We also sell pre-owned vehicles. On average, we have about 80 pre-owned vehicles in stock, so that would be 200 vehicles. Actually, that's about 180 vehicles in stock. We currently are using the other property. What lot is that? The lot in the back, we use that for some of our overflow right now. Then add service parking and customer parking. We're actually gonna be slightly under what we need, and, you know, we'll have to look at our inventory situation. But that would be the bare minimum parking that we require.
So you wouldn't be able to lose any other parking spaces to landscape?
No, it has a, you know, detrimental effect on the.
Try to stand closer to the microphone.
Sure. Well, I mean, as you know, you've all
You too,
purchased
Matt.
cars. Matt, you want to?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you've all, you want to go to the dealership and have a selection. So, you know, that's what car dealers are about. So we need the parking spaces for the inventory and for customer parking and for service customers.
You're losing 40 spaces, is that 38 spaces roughly from all of the improvements?
Correct.
On the existing lot.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, existing one, you know, 220.
And you heard my comments about the trees, the problems that trees would present to the site. You agree with those, correct?
Yes.
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 Okay. And
Tall trees are not good for car dealerships.
Does the zoning ordinance address parking spaces that you need?
yeah, I've met with the zoning officer and we've gone over and it is compliant with the zoning ordinance, actually.
Any other comments from the board?
I do have a comment on one of the waivers. But I just wanted, Pete, I wanted to ask, before we get into the waivers and any further discussion, the work we do up here, we have the economic, financial items, John, that you respectfully brought up, I think is wholly inappropriate for our discussions up here. We can't make any decisions up here based on economics, what they bring to the table relative to jobs and finances. I don't think that's appropriate discussion to be having with the board.
Well, I don't want to necessarily get into what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. You have standards, you have in your regulations, you have findings that you have to make for waivers, et cetera. So it's a matter of following and reviewing what's in your regulations based on the evidence that's presented. So I'll leave it at that.
So I guess then I'll get into the only waiver question I had was number 2, the windows, which I support, but I'd also comment that I believe the zoning ordinance limits signage and windows, and I know how this happens. I just want you to be aware of the zoning requirement relative to windows, because you know, it looks great now, but you know, I think we end up seeing sale on today's cars, and it just starts to get real busy, and it looks good now, but you start hanging signs in the windows and blocking them. I know the zoning ordinance addresses.
Yeah, and my understanding is that these had a discussion with the zoning officer, and at least what they're presenting now is compliant and doesn't require any additional approvals as far as the signage is concerned.
But yeah, you're aware of that.
I am generally aware that there are regulations relating to special sales and things like that, temporary signs, and I didn't actually have that discussion with the zoning officer.
That's not compliant with BMW as well. We are not allowed to put sale signs, use the word sale, or hang any signs in the window.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? I'm sorry, did you have?
I did have one more question for Mr. Grenga that I just wanted to ask him.
Before we take the public comments.
And then I did want to wrap up and address some of your standards, if that's acceptable. Mr. Grenga, can you just come up when you're there was discussion earlier about the financial consequences.
Move toward the microphone.
There you go. Go ahead.
There was discussion earlier about the financial consequences of not complying with BMW's requirements. Could you just tell the board what would occur if you were to incur those financial consequences?
Well, the financial consequences could range from substantial financial penalties from the factory or termination of the dealer agreement. So termination of the BMW franchise basically means there is no dealership. So we would be, at that point, we would be, forced to find another location to build in order to retain the BMW franchise, which is quite a valuable franchise. Thank you.
So if I may just go over some of the standards that you have for granting approval of a development plan review. The first standard that you have in your regulations is that the granting of the approval will not result in conditions inimical to the public health, safety, and welfare. A number of points support the fact that that condition is, that standard is met. First of all, this is a permitted by right use in the general business district. It's already a heavily commercial area. It actually was an automobile dealership for many, many years. They're just reestablishing the former automobile dealership use at the property. The physical alteration permit that was granted by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation reflects that there is no traffic safety issue. The remediation that Mr. Sicoccio spoke about is a significant public health benefit, we believe. And as you heard him say, if the project doesn't happen and the building doesn't come down, they're not going to be removing all that impacted soil. And also reflecting this condition is met, you have the neighbors' support. So we don't think there's anything inimical to the public health, safety, or welfare relating to this project. Your second standard is that the granting of approval will not substantially or permanently injure the appropriate use of the property in the surrounding area or the zoning district. I think the same facts that I mentioned earlier, the fact that it's a general business district, heavily commercial area, there's adequate screening to the property to the north, which would be the only property that could be impacted, and the neighbor is here, and he's, I believe, satisfied with the plans. Your third standard is that the plans for the project comply with all requirements of this chapter and regulations or waivers have been granted. And we went over the waivers and the rationale for the waivers, and we think that the standards have all been met. And I understand that you have the requirements, of course, but you also have to remember that in your ordinance are the provisions for waivers. So it contemplates deviation and appropriate circumstances, and we believe that these circumstances are appropriate. Number 4 is that the plan for the projects are consistent with the comprehensive plan. And here, I think, what we're doing is you're allowing an established business to survive here at this location and to thrive. And it's significant that both the existing and the future existing zoning and the future land use maps, which I have copies of if you'd like to see them, designate this area as a commercial area. It is, of course, a well-known commercial area. Goal E1A of your economic development element states that it is a goal of the town to create conditions that are attractive to the growth of existing and to attracting new businesses. So the economic aspect of this is very much relevant, in our opinion, because it relates directly to your comprehensive plan and your economic development element in your comprehensive plan. If they're not allowed to build that structure with the waivers that we've requested, the business will go away. So that certainly would run counter to the goal in your comprehensive plan. And as indicated earlier, they are a substantial taxpayer and employer. The introduction to your economic development section of your comprehensive plan also states that the town will support a positive business environment. So within the context, of course, of your regulations, you're supposed to be promoting business in the town. The land use section also states at page 9-11 that land designated for commercial uses form the hub of Middletown's business district and provide important commercial services to the town and the area. And I think being a resident of the area myself, I know that it's an important service that BMW and all the businesses on West Main Road provide. It's where people go to do their shopping for all manner of things, including automobiles. And your comprehensive plan recognizes that and promotes it. So we think we're entirely consistent with your comprehensive plan in proposing this project. So, and then the last standard is that any conditions or restrictions that are necessary to ensure that these guidelines have been met have been incorporated into the written approval or recommendation. And there have been, we received approval from the Technical Review Committee with some recommendations or some conditions which we would expect to be incorporated into any approval that you give us tonight. Several conditions have been discussed tonight which we are agreeable with, which we would also expect to be incorporated into any approval tonight. So that also is supported. So with that, we just request, again, this is compliant with the zoning ordinance, so it's not going to the zoning board. This would be the approval of the development plan, and we request that it be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment? Do you wish to speak? This is your chance.
My name is Ian Scott. I'm the president of Crystal Spring Water Company, who we are the abutters directly to the north of this of the site. And obviously our main concern are the environmental aspects of it. And I do think that the removal of a lot of the worst of the contaminated soil and the repositioning of the rest of the contaminated soil away from the wetland area in a capped space where it's not likely to have any negative effect is all a very good thing. And the improvements to the drainage system combined with the remediation of the contaminated part, I think this is a big improvement from existing conditions. And so we really we're very pleased that this is getting finally taken care of. And I'd also like to say that DEM, with all the development pressure over the last 40 years and all the projects in this area, the DEM is very, very familiar with our spring and our unique aquifer. And the fact that they're confident that this will be an improvement and will not affect us is very, very important. So basically, no, we think this will be an improvement, and well, we don't have a problem with it at all, and we wish them good luck. And I'd also just like to say thank you to the board for your concerns and taking taking the Crystal Spring property nearby to heart, and I appreciate your concern for us as well. I appreciate it. So,
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else from the public who would like to make a comment? I have a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. May I have a motion for a favorable recommendation to, on the development plan review, including the request for waivers?
It's a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the development plan review.
So before we do that, can we,
We'll have discussion after the motion is made. That's where we are. Now, we need we need one additional condition that says that they will look at the landscape plan, develop it further, according to the discussion we had this evening, submit it to the tree commission for their review and approval.
there were a couple of other conditions too,
Would it, and
which actually goes to my wanting to have discussion before a
put
motion.
them on the table.
What?
Or
What do you want on the table?
mention the conditions, we'll add them to the motion.
Okay. So we've already talked about it, the circulation arrows, and identifying the circulation on the site, and signage at the north entrance. Which, again, the discussion was is that I wanted to see this on the plan prior to giving approval. And I thought that the tree commission would weigh in also prior to us giving approval.
So you would like to see these before we vote on them?
I would. I mean,
As opposed to just making it
there's
a
a lot
condition.
here. There's a lot here, and I just wanted to, and I want to give them an opportunity to go and ask again to see if they can do something with the, are they going to add that the trees on the north side of the service area, or anything else that they could do there. I thought we were going to give them an opportunity to do that. That's all.
BJ, would you like to see the landscape plan before we vote on this?
I would like to see the landscape plan, but I don't mind voting on it as long as the landscape plan is revised. But how do we
Well,
coordinate that?
I think the best way is to just, if the applicant is willing, is to have them submit the revised landscape plan and some drawings that show these changes that Bill is mentioning with signage and traffic flow.
And
As a condition?
Well, if you are willing to continue this till the next meeting so that we can review these.
We are under some severe time constraints with the manufacturer, and I understand your concerns, but I think that hopefully we can facilitate something.
we're going to be back here less than a month.
We're under severe time constraints with the manufacturer. We just got another extension on our letter of intent. And I understand your concerns, but hopefully there's some way that we can come to an agreement with our assurances or as conditions that we could get some type of a vote tonight. Believe me, it's not just me that that I'm dealing with. I need to get some type of resolution to know that we can move forward to meet the next milestone, which is architectural drawings completion by a certain date. Again, in our letter of intent and in our dealer agreement, the financial penalties will start on any missed milestone, not just the not moving in the building, the completion of the architectural drawings, the start of construction date, the 60% completion date, and the completion date. All of those are milestones that must be met with our agreement with the manufacturer. So I completely understand that you're looking for some assurances and you'd like us to come back with some additional drawings.
Let me ask a question. Can we put a condition that the drawings be modified to reflect the changes that Bill has raised as part of the approval process?
And the landscape.
And if we can, how do we know that the drawings are modified?
So the condition could be that prior to permitting, the modifications to the plan to show the arrows and signage have been included. When it comes to landscaping, I'm not sure how that would be included since that's not a specific item that we could check off. So I'm not asking Peter to weigh in.
We don't know what at this point, you don't know what revisions to the landscape plan they're going to propose, whether they can actually, based on circulation and DEM requirements, whether they can do much, given the constraints that they have. And I know it came up sort of as a alternative to modifying the exterior of the rear portion of the building, but that would be difficult from a staff level to delegate that to the staff, to say that whatever they came out of that process.
Well, if the tree commission reviewed the revised landscape plan and they said it was fine, now BJ sits on that, so there's planning board representation there, and she's heard the discussion, so if the tree commission...
I suppose you could say, subject to the revised landscape plan being approved by the tree commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're... But,
Yeah, that's what I... That's,
That would be terrific.
Yes, I'm
Yeah, but-
uncomfortable with that. I want this, I support much of what you're doing, much of what they're doing. But, you know, we're the only board that gets to look at this. there's no zoning oversight. This is the, one and done kind of a night.
Sure.
I'm just uncomfortable with it. In my eyes, there's too many things up in the air. But really more importantly is I want to see them give a good effort to go back and see if something can be done. Joe, just for while we were discussing, I didn't, that box there it's EFIS. According to the plan, it's an EFIS product with a smooth finish. It's not block. I thought it was a block wall. So you still get the same effect, but it really isn't. It's going to look like probably a shiny wall. So to me, these are things that I think warrant, despite the testimony, and I respect the testimony and the constraints you're under, but this is the first time I'm really getting a good look at this, and there are too many open-ended things for me to support approving it tonight. That's all.
If I may offer a couple of comments. There are a lot more people, even if there aren't other boards looking at it, other than the technical review committee, which did look at it, but your zoning officer has also spent a lot of time looking at it.
Did we get a report?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to suggest, I believe the zoning officer is your sign officer under your zoning ordinance. So perhaps you could make it subject to his review of the directional signage. I'm sure it'll be a customary type of directional signage, which the traffic engineer was prepared and still could, if you'd like, describe what the signage would be. But it could be subject to, condition upon his review and approval of the directional signage. You're also your building inspectors are going to be looking at everything to make sure it complies. So there's a lot of other oversight that's going into this. It's not, and we've had two lengthy meetings now discussing this and a site visit.
Let me get a sense of the board. How do others feel on this?
I want to add something. I think it is our ability and sometimes our responsibility to talk about economic impacts, because as you very well pointed out, it's in our comp plan, one of the elements. Number two, you have a town council here who is begging, literally begging for new revenue so that we can sustain the services we provide to our citizens. This is an important project. I don't even know how many $1 million we're talking about, a lot. So maybe we can make a special effort. I would be willing to come in here for an hour sometime later this month, as soon as the tree commission's done with their project and the things are done that Bill wants to do, and maybe have a 1-hour special meeting if the rest of the board would go for it. I think it's an important project. It's important to the economic health of this town. And I think that's the priority we need to put on it at this particular point.
So let me ask, how quickly could you have a revised landscape plan? And how quickly could you revise the drawings to show these signage markings and sign?
Pam, could you comment on the landscape? When is the tree commission?
And if I might remind everyone, we did move the February meeting up by a week, so it's now February 5th, so it's sooner than normal.
I have to consult with my client, but we would hope that we could have a special meeting well before February 5th.
I need a vote. I don't want.
Okay.
And I hate to. And again, this is not your concern, but we just need. I need to know whether we're moving forward or we're not, or we have to make a contingency plan. That's where we are right now.
What would you see?
And the reason I again, not your concern, the process through DEM took many months longer than anticipated. So we have been asking for extension after extension from BMW. And again, that's not, that's our issue, not yours, but I'm just letting you know where we stand. And I think that the time and effort and money that we've invested with this DEM proposal, which does nothing but benefit the environment, this project, is part of why we're so far behind, time-wise. So I understand there are some things, but to me, Although maybe not to you, they do seem like minor issues to deal with, like signage and directional flow and some of the landscaping, which we're more than willing to accommodate as much as possible as we can with the DEM. The overall project, I need to know whether we're moving forward with the full architectural drawings. I mean, we just have deadlines we're dealing with. It's that simple. So I'm just requesting that if we can have a vote this evening on it, if it's up, it's up. If it's down, it's down. I mean, we're you know, it's business. We'll move on. But we need to know.
Yeah,
I myself, I'm okay with putting conditions on a vote.
I am too.
And
I am too.
I am.
so I get the sense of the board is that they're willing to put conditions on. So I say let's take the vote this evening. So, may I have a motion to approve the, let me get this right now, development plan review with conditions. And I need a review of the conditions we've put on here, Rita.
A motion to approve the development plan review, including the waivers. But the conditions I have listed right now are add circulation arrows to the site plan, add the signage regarding the north entrance, and then perhaps, I don't have some good language regarding the tree
Also the
commission.
direction of flow, the flow direction.
No, I'd like it to say the circulation arrows, but a circulation and operations plan. Note to the plans, something to that effect.
And approval of the tree commissions.
And then the tree commission, are you looking for approval by the tree
Approval
commission?
by the tree commission, yes, of the revised landscaping plan.
Sounds good.
Did you get signage too? You mentioned
Signage at the north entrance.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Any other conditions that we discussed?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Steve, I apologize. What was the last condition regarding the signage?
There were 3 conditions. It was approval by the tree commission of the revised landscaping plan, adding the circulation and operations notes to the site plan, and signage at the north entrance to be added to the site plan.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and there were 4 TRC conditions. 2 of them have been met by your updated plan today. So the driveway access has been widened, so the first condition is no longer necessary. And
TRC.
The TRC. And the condition regarding the average pre-development grade has been calculated and put on the plan, so that is no longer necessary. So there are 2 remaining conditions, number 2 and 3, about submitting to the industrial pre-treatment program with Newport Water, and prior to permitting, the town engineer must approve and review the stormwater design
These are the conditions from the TRC.
from the TRC.
Yeah. So they're included also. Everyone okay with that? May I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Opposed. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 5D, public hearing, proposed amendments to the rules and regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, section 521.1E, infrastructure to require litter and trash management and bicycle racks on commercial properties as part of the development plan review process. May I have a motion to open the public hearing? Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to open the public hearing. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Public hearing is open. Is there anything to discuss on this?
No.
May I have a motion to, do we approve or
You need to close the public hearing.
propose to the town council?
Move to close the public hearing.
Move to close, yeah. Thank you. And it's seconded?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. May I have a motion to, do we propose recommendation to the town council?
Yes.
For these rules and regulations, for these amendments regarding litter and trash management and bicycle racks on commercial property.
Make a motion to forward this to the council for their consideration.
Correct. Motion's made and seconded to forward this to the town council for their consideration. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Updates. We have two status reports. One is the status report on planning board items. Does anyone have any comments on those? The only, I don't have any comments on that. The next item is the status report on comprehensive plan implementation. Are there any comments on that? I had one comment on that, just for your information, and that was on the very last item, number 11. I suggested to Ron and Rita that we mention the fact that the impact study is coming very shortly. We have a meeting on the 29th to review that, and we should add that into the status report on that, because that will affect smart growth development. And Ron was amenable to that. The way we disposed of that is, as you notice, Ron copied the town administrator on this, and typically the town administrator will forward it to the town council. So I asked Ron if he could update the memo and give a new copy to the town administrator, which he said he would do. So if that's okay with everyone, that'll be the action on that. Is that all right with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. I assume there's nothing on BRAC, committee reports, rural village, that's on hold, I understand.
That's at future, Will.
Yeah, use table?
I think we have a meeting scheduled soon, I'm not sure when.
Just said it, right? Just said it.
We already, we have a meeting date already, I don't know what it is, but I know we have a meeting coming up soon.
Okay. Marijuana regulation?
We had a meeting last week, January 3rd, with a conference called Dwight, making progress, and we'll have one. We found that the state had made some new revisions, and Dwight and Peter will let us know when the next meeting is.
Yeah, we're going to try to confirm with DBR as to when they expect the new regulations to be finalized, so then we can come up with a timetable for the next draft of the ordinance.
Any public comment, did we find if there was any public comment?
Not yet, not that I'm able to find.
Well, the state's not going anywhere with it this year.
That it? Airport zoning?
We have a subcommittee meeting coming up, I believe, on the 26th. The next one's been scheduled. Right there.
I don't know, I have the 15th.
Or, yeah, well, I mean, it's
Soon.
it's coming up. Soon.
Tree commission?
We have a meeting coming up on the last Thursday of this month.
Open space and fields?
We had a meeting on December 18th. There was a group of Middletown pickleball players who came in and gave a presentation and requesting support from the Open Space and Fields Committee to recommend to the town council to build a forecourt facility, possibly in Linden Park, for pickleball. So it was voted that that we provide, that the Open Space and Field Committee provide a recommendation to the town council to recommending their request. Valley Access, the Tree Commission has asked the town to lay out new pathways on the land recently are recovered from the Kempenau Boulevard properties. At the drive-in, the East Coast Construction is doing site work. They are hauling in fill, which is to be processed on site. Loam and seed is scheduled for 2020, for the spring of 2020. The fields could be ready for play in the fall of 2021. And they were working on some property scoring issues. That's it.
Thank you. Conservation Commission?
Their meeting's been indefinitely on hold, I guess.
The one thing I want to mention on that, they're looking for 2 new members because Gary Paquette is resigned. I guess he's moving out of the area. And then Dave Huntoon, who is still on the Conservation Commission, but is also on the Zoning Board, is looking to just be on the Zoning Board. So if anybody knows of anybody who might be a good candidate, there will be 2 spots.
And
2 spots on
presumably,
the Conservation Commission.
presumably when those 2 slots are filled, they'll elect the chairperson and get going again.
Yes.
Aquidneck Island Planning Commission,
There was no meeting in December, there's a meeting next week.
meeting next week. And lastly, on your agenda, you see the upcoming meetings, plus all these subcommittee meetings that people have mentioned, so the planning board seems to be very busy, and that's good. You have a motion to adjourn.
Seconded. So adjourned.
You have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
That was close.
I don't think we scheduled a meeting, Rita, the use table. Can't find it anywhere. I have to go log and look at it.